Well, Joe, we could start in a few places with tonight's show. I want to start with a little follow-up to what caused a lot of conversation and some consternation, which was the Jeff Jarrett MJF segment last week that went on a long time. I thought this week was a good recovery if you're committed to going forward with it, which I don't think they should just blow it off and have an impromptu brawl on Collision and then say, well, the match won't happen because Jeff Jarrett's ankle's hurt and just blow. I mean, that's going too far, even though last week was a bit of a debacle. I actually like Jarrett saying, hey, Karen saying it, but Jarrett saying, I got in the dirt with you. I got in the gutter. I shouldn't have done it. I like that they were separate. They both were rather pithy. There was no verbosity this week and straying and trying to get in every meta comment and dig. And I thought it was a model MJF promo in that it was focused on putting heat on himself, putting over the babyface, not undercutting him, not making it seem like AEW is the dying company because Jeff Jarrett's a centerpiece, even though that can't be thought or unsaid. So are you with me on this, or are you just going, my God, they're doubling down, which I can imagine some people thinking too.
It's more going in the right direction, but it is kind of like, okay, I'd rather just them get to the match already and move on with this stuff with Jeff Jarrett, because now they're going to him going for the championship, or at least they're teasing that right now with him setting up this match against Claudio Castagnoli instead of going straight to the MJF match. So now they're stretching that out a little bit longer, even after that very overly long promo that they did last week, which I did like that this week that they addressed that. It went into some deeper, as they described it, going into the gutters with MJF, and so I did not like the approach that they took last week of borrowing from promos of a different era that I just don't think works in today's day and age. And so I like that they addressed it. I didn't like that Jeff Jarrett just really blew off his wife before he went out there. I mean, this guy's supposed to be a babyface and just kind of blew him off.
He did kiss her on the forehead, but
sure.
But my question, sorry, I know you're on a roll. My question is, why didn't Karen bring this up in the last 6 days? Like, why did she have to interrupt poor Alex Marvez trying to ask Jarrett a question?
Because that's what everyone does.
I know.
Yeah,
she could have just said, hey, Jeff, I told you this, and I've been saying it all week, but I want to look at the camera and tell the fans something. That's not my husband, what you saw last week. I want to let everybody know that because I know you better than anyone, that what you did was getting in the gutter with MJF, and I want the fans to know that is not the husband that I've known for years. Like, address us so it makes sense that she's doing it on camera. I like those little details covered in that. Most people aren't worried about it, but I think that all adds up to a better product.
Yeah, I mean, MJF was right. He said that we're owed an apology for what happened last week, as he yes. talked about it later.
Yep.
But yeah, I did like the fact that they addressed that part of it. I mean, Jeff Jarrett is who he is, at this point. I mean, you know what you're going to get with a Jeff Jarrett promo. You're in Tennessee, so of course he's going to mention Jerry Lawler, and continue on with his quest of pursuing going for the world championship, which I just, you can be a fan of the nostalgia of Jeff Jarrett, but as I've commented on my show multiple times, that I just don't think that 57-year-old Jeff Jarrett taking up as much TV time, trying to promote him as one last run going for the championship is the right move for AEW at this point.
And that's the macro. The micro is good recovery this week, I would argue. I posit that this was a good recovery for them. Let's acknowledge in the storyline way that last week was uncharacteristic of Jeff, not something he's proud of. He seemed very proud last week while doing it, but he's thought better of it. And then have MJF come in and cut, again, the verbosity and the wandering, and let me say every meta thing I can think of. And it was edited, it was concise, and it put heat. And I love the closing line, which is you're gonna find, and that's a good thing about a promo that's a little tighter like tonight, is you remember something. And the closing line of Jeff, I'm going to show you it's better to make a deal with the devil than, well, now I say I remember it. I remember his wording. It was good. What that is better.
Now I'm looking it up. Yeah, it's better to make a deal with the devil than to. Jeez.
No, the show grinds to a halt. Instead of defying him.
Yes.
Better to make a deal with the devil instead of defying. Sorry, MJF. I said it was memorable, and then here I blow it and forget. But his wording was so good, I wanted to honor it by being precise. Let's just say that. And I thought it was a good line. It's basically, they revisited the genesis of the story, which is, I'll help you win, but I want the title shot. And then he goes, I did it because I think you're easy to beat. And so all the heat was on MJF being a manipulator and Jarrett and him trying to take advantage of him. So this was good. But the macro point is AEW isn't, and we're going to get into it, it's in this kind of ugly building in Knoxville. And it worked in some ways in a positive, gritty way, but in other ways counterproductive. We're expecting to hear from an on-site correspondent, and we'll talk about what it was like in there. But it is a switch now. It's a couple weeks in a row. They're running smaller buildings. They're coming to Roy Wilkins Auditorium in St. Paul. They're, and so what you have is that more intimate, packed atmosphere. But you got 57-year-old Jeff Jarrett hearkening to Jerry Lawler, the king of Memphis. They're in Knoxville. He's talking about the highway he's driving. They're in Alabama next week. It's starting to feel Southern and minor league. And Southern doesn't have to be minor league. You can be minor league in the Midwest or in the East, but it doesn't feel like Jeff Jarrett is the answer to AEW trying to bring back a lot of lost fans. We run the ratings on PWTorch.com, and I always put in perspective. Here's where they were this week. Here's where they were 1 and 2 years ago. Not just 1 week that could be a little bit off the 10-week averages, and we look at those numbers. They've lost a lot of viewers, a lot more than those who have cut the cord with cable. Mm-hmm. And how do you get them back? I just don't think is good. And by the way, last week aside, Jeff Jarrett's been really good. I think you can show Jeff Jarrett's body language, his facial expressions, the cadence, the delivery, and go, you know what? There's wrestlers who could learn from this. I think he's been more good than bad. I've been really hard on him at times, in part because he's an uncool 57-year-old trying to, carny his way into a main event again. And I don't know that that's serving AEW. I think it's serving him. I don't think his heart is in the wrong place. I think he thinks it's serving the product because I'm sure he, like a lot of veterans, watch a lot of what's not going on AEW and says, let me show them. But that was his defense for main eventing TNA at a time when they needed to feature new stars, and he put himself front and center, and MJF called him out for that last week. So with Jarrett, it's a mixed bag, but it's not all negative. The problem is he's challenging for a world title, as you said, Joel. He's got, so when they're trying to run a national and frankly international company now with Australia and the show coming up, and as awesome as Southern Wrestling is, at the heritage of it, and I'm a Von Erich Freebird fan. When Memphis Wrestling was syndicated in the Twin Cities in the late 80s, I was so thrilled. I chased down tapes. I watched Gordon Soley's last run calling Continental Championship Wrestling out of Alabama. I love Southern Wrestling, but if you're AEW and you're trying to compete with WWE right now, it's starting to feel more small time than obviously it did early on. And so there's, and the cool factor is an issue, and I mean, we no more Pointer Sisters after 1 week, so that's good. But yeah, Jarrett feels like it's confirming a feeling that fans have that this is a product that isn't red hot and leaning into the future. And it doesn't have the cool factor. I'll throw it back to you. I know I kind of jumped in as you were rolling.
Yeah, I would certainly say that Jeff Jarrett's been very motivated, over these last few weeks and trying to put his best foot forward. But I agree that, AEW has an identity at this point of it is trying to appeal to a lot of people. It doesn't, it's trying to be a lot of different kinds of wrestling to attract all sorts of different wrestling fans. But it has this factor of just this uncool stuff with Jeff Jarrett, especially with the history of TNA. I mean, very specifically because of that history of putting him in such a spot. But, Tony has a soft spot for a lot of the veterans and people who have helped him along the way and helped him with his company and trying to give them a spot on TV and honor them. And, it's just not always the best thing for trying to grow your product, like what you see with WWE and how they've been able to really catch fire, build stars. Of course, they got a lot of momentum for a lot of different reasons. That's going to be almost nearly impossible for AEW to catch up to that standard at this point. But you can try to be more cool than you're feeling right now. And yeah, buildings like this definitely contribute to that. But I mean, it was actually good to see that it was a full building, although it was an ugly building.
2,700. And it looked full. They could do a wide shot and ugly building, but full.
Mm-hmm. So they're able to showcase more people there. And they definitely showed that off with the brawl and be able to go backstage into those areas. But, they haven't found that thing to keep building upon this consistency to really get that cool factor back. And, I don't know if it's just an impossible task to do with where WWE's at right now.
I don't think, I'm not an expert on how to configure buildings to shoot on national television, but I would say the number one goal when you're scouting that building is don't set the hard camera opposite of a big blank wall. I don't care what else you have to do. I abandon the stage if you have to. I think they should have shot that in a way where the backdrop wasn't a 15-foot blank wall. They're going to run into that at Roy Wilkins too. You got to figure out some way to dress that up, and shoot it differently. That was tough. Like when Hurt Business were celebrating the Take Team title win, and it's just like this black big wall.
It doesn't look impressive. It doesn't look like a big deal when they win that championship.
No. And they had the because they couldn't hang the lights from the ceiling like they normally do at arenas, so they had the trusses and they were able to climb it. And I thought they used the atmosphere well. We've got some great chat comments going on about Jeff Jarrett, a variety of perspectives. So I want to address them, and some people are reacting to what we're saying, Joel. But I want to pause. I want to introduce ourselves in the show, and then we're going to get to Ian, who was on site in that arena we just talked about tonight. He's going to give an on-site perspective. So we'll get to him in just a minute. This is the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show for Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. I'm Wade Keller, host of the show, editor, publisher, and founder of the long-running Pro Wrestling Torch Weekly newsletter, predating the internet, predating podcasting, 1,900 plus issues published. New one this week. I like to hold it up when it's at my desk on mail day. Talking about Tessa Blanchard returning and the fans chanting at her with the cover story on TNA Genesis, and Joe Hendry. He's got the sub headline because of Tessa. He's not the headline. He's not the biggest font.
TNA gets the headline. Who would have thought?
Yeah, well, we got. Yeah, I mean, it deserved it this week, especially with the connection to WWE. I mean, like suddenly there's like this different. There's a different layer of relevance to what goes on in TNA now.
Absolutely.
That there's that working agreement. So yeah, the TNA, they make headlines sometimes when they run their big pay-per-views. Joe Hendry, on the cover. I don't want to say this too loud. I get 2 copies of Pro Wrestling Illustrated comped to me for some reason every time they come out. So I have 2. I can look over here and I can see 2 copies of Joe Hendry on the cover of the latest PWI. So yeah, they deserve the status of being the cover story. Greg Parks with his feature column on the Continental Classic, looking at winners and losers, who gained, who lost in that. That's also in this week's newsletter. So go VIP, subscribe. You can read the PDF and all text issue. But we're here to talk AEW Dynamite tonight here on the Wade Keller Post Show. We are here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, live streaming on the PWTorch YouTube channel. So search PWTorch on YouTube or youtube.com/PWTorch. You can find a link to our live streams in my TV reports at PWTorch.com. Every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Raw, Dynamite, SmackDown, respectively. We're planning to do something after Saturday night's main event on Saturday night. We're still locking that down. So mark your calendar, check for a post show here on the PWTorch YouTube channel, or look for a post show podcast on that event this weekend. I'm not sure if it's going to be on the Wade Keller podcast feed, our Red Logo show, or on the PWTorch Dailycast feed as a Wrestling Night in America. We're still working that out. So while you're listening to us right now on the podcast side of things or on YouTube, subscribe so you get everything. Search Wade Keller on your podcast app, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Android, iOS, whatever app you use. Subscribe to the red and blue logos that pop up. The blue logo includes our flagship episode, which yesterday featured Todd Martin. We talked about Tessa Blanchard, Joe Hendry, a lot of TNA talk actually on the flagship yesterday. The red logo show are the post shows, the podcast audio version of those. Of our shows here, that also live stream on YouTube. And then search PWTorch, subscribe for free to the PWTorch Dailycast. You'll get a lot of great shows, including one co-hosted by Joel Dehnel, covering AEW, the All Elite Conversation Club. Joel, plug that, and then we're going to get to Ian.
Absolutely. Yeah. I host the All Elite Conversation Club alongside my co-host, Greg Canner. And we talk about AEW and all the happenings there, including the news. We review Dynamite and then leading up into the pay-per-view shows. And we have great conversations there. We have a great mailbag trivia. Zach is here in the comments as well. He's a regular contributor to our show. We get regular emails from Dustin, who emails multiple of the other shows as well. So we just have a great conversation. We look forward to it every week. Greg and I have become great friends, and we have great camaraderie with each other. So it's just a fun conversation back and forth, talking about what we're seeing in AEW.
I love when I put together. Usually people don't come to me. Usually I put two people together to do the podcast on the Daily Cast, which features, generally speaking, two hosts. There's been cases where people, form their own duo and pitch doing a show. But I love that some really, I think, genuine good friendships, sometimes outlasting the run of the podcast, have developed on the PWTorch Daily Cast. I'm glad that you and Greg get along so well. I either have a knack for it or just pro wrestling fans with common interests just get along in general. I don't know, but and maybe the Torch and our brand brings like-minded people together who are going to get along and enjoy the way we talk about wrestling. So check that out. Search PWTorch on your podcast app. In addition to Wade Keller, subscribe to them all. Okay, you can join us in the chat if you're watching us live on YouTube. You can also email us at wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com. And if you are a VIP member or Patreon supporter, go to my TV report or the Patreon page and look for the link to be a video caller. You can turn off your camera and be audio only if you choose. And you're welcome to join the conversation tonight. Now, let's get to the next phase of the show, which is Ian, who attended tonight. He joins us on camera from his car or a very elaborate set somewhere that looks like a car. Ian, can you confirm you're sitting in an actual car?
Yes, I'm in my car in the parking garage while everyone is fighting about getting out of here on time.
Oh.
So I'm going to wait for a little bit.
I love that strategy. That's mine too. Don't sit on the parking ramp in traffic. Just wait it out somewhere else or in your car. Well, thanks for joining us. I saw in the chat when you said it was a wild night. Elaborate. What's your big picture takeaway from tonight's event?
The arena was really fired up. The first segment, which was Kenny and Ospreay, and I was actually in the area when Ospreay got on the railing and did the moonsault off. So that was pretty cool.
Too bad the TV audience didn't get to see it. The director missed it, but yeah.
It was crazy. And then after Hurt Syndicate won the tag belts, it kind of felt like all the air got pulled out of the Coliseum that we were in.
Why do you think? Because of what came next, or the crowd was just burned out?
I think the crowd was burned out because we got like the fight in the crowd, and then we got a tag title change, and then I think the next match, correct me if I'm wrong, was Swerve and
no, you got Jeff
AR
Jarrett
Fox,
next.
which was
you got Jeff Jarrett next
Jeff
before
Jarrett.
Swerve.
How could
Jarrett
you forget?
was kind of in the promo. I mean, when he mentioned Jerry Lawler, people in the crowd behind me were like, "Oh, really, Jerry Lawler?" So that kind of felt weird, but
yeah.
I mean, then you had the Swerve match, which kind of felt we kind of were expecting a squash match. I don't know if it was announced, but they announced Joe and Nick Wayne, which we never got, so that kind of felt weird.
Did they address that, by the way?
And then no, it never came up, which was really weird. And then Hayter Hart was kind of and then it kind of felt like everyone was just wiped out and exhausted by Cope and Pac.
So, okay, lots of questions for you. I want to ask about the Jarrett promo. This is considered Jarrett country, in a general sense. Knoxville, not the core territory like Nashville and Memphis, but what kind of reaction did he get, and what did you think of his promo, and how did the crowd react to him? And why do you think people aren't into Jerry Lawler? Has it just been too long, or has he become too much of a WWE cartoon joke? What's your take on that? So Jarrett, crowd reaction, and then also the Lawler comment.
So we couldn't really hear any of the backstage segments. Like when Karen popped up, we couldn't hear anything she was saying. So we kind of thought Jarrett had a backstage segment, and that was it. He wasn't even I don't think he was announced for the show. I don't think he was marketed for the show. So when he came out, we were like, oh, that was really cool. And then he was kind of just playing to the crowd, kind of getting the cheap pops, it felt like. And I kind of agree with what people are saying in the chat. It kind of comes across that Jarrett is not really a contender for the world title. I don't think people see Jarrett beating a guy like Moxley for the belt. So we're kind of just getting past this whole, Jarrett playing to the crowd, saying, oh, yeah, I can win the belt, when we all know he's most likely not going to win the belt. And And then when Claudio came out, everyone was kind of intrigued because we thought Moxley was coming out, and then everyone was disappointed when Claudio came out. The crowd kind of went like, oh, really? It's just Claudio. We don't care about Claudio.
So that was interesting because it's too bad that you didn't get to hear what Karen Jarrett said, because she, said that what Jeff said last week wasn't in character for him. He got in the gutter with MJF. He's better than that. That's not who he is now. That might have set the tone for his promo a little bit better. Joel, Ian brought up a lot of stuff that happened on tonight's show. Jump in with a question for him.
Yeah, what else was really surprising to you throughout the show? I mean, you talked about the reaction to Jeff Jarrett there. After he challenged Claudio, the crowd was kind of, they didn't really give much of a reaction. It also didn't, it seemed to me that when Kenny Omega set up the challenge for Takeshita and Fletcher, that it didn't get like this awesome, amazing reaction of these guys aligning with each other. Like, what really stood out or surprised you about a crowd reaction or anything from the show?
So what stood out was Omega, when he came out, I think he was the only guy that had pyro the entire night. And when I kind of think like all the air left the Coliseum when they finished the fight. We couldn't really hear what Omega was saying because I think they had a theme song playing for like 15, 20 seconds.
Yeah.
So we kind of couldn't hear what he was saying. And then by that point, when everyone kind of settled down, we were like, oh, he challenged Takeshita. And I think everyone was kind of expecting a tag match to happen sooner rather than later. So I don't think everyone was fully surprised by it, but I think everyone was kind of blown away because this was the first AEW show in Knoxville, and we weren't expecting like a wild brawl where we were getting like up and close with all the superstars. So we were kind of trying to keep watch because we lost Ospreay and Archer in the brawl. Where I was sitting, I saw Kenny and Cage and Takeshita and Callis right by the merch table. And we lost Ospreay and Archer during the brawl. So we were kind of trying to watch the screen to see where Ospreay and Archer was, but also keep our eye on Omega and Cage and Takeshita.
Joel, do you want to follow up on that, or otherwise I can jump in?
Yeah, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, so I want to talk about the Hurt Business crowd reaction because they were chanting, Bobby, Bobby. Was there any kind of support for Private Party? And did you feel like the goal of Hurt Business and MVP on commentary seems to be heels, and the job of a heel in pro wrestling isn't to be cool. It's not to sell merch. It's to get your babyface opponents over. Now, one could argue Private Party aren't worth it, or maybe would have been, but it's too late the way that they were framed as champs. But talk about what the vibe in the building is for Hurt Business, and if AEW is just fighting a headwind, that's not worth fighting when it comes to how much the fans just want to cheer how cool they are.
I kind of agree. I kind of think they are kind of trying to fight it. When Hurt Syndicate came out, we popped really hard, and Private Party didn't really get the kind of championship entrance that I think a lot of people were expecting because they switched theme songs on them towards the end of the entrance. I don't know if you guys caught that. And, like, we were kind of people were trying to cheer for them, but I think everyone just cared about Lashley and Benjamin and MVP because we're familiar with them as wrestling fans. I don't think fans are really behind Private Party like AEW and Tony Khan kind of want us to be. So yeah, everyone was chanting for Bobby and Shelton throughout the whole match. And when they won, we all popped really loud for them.
Yeah. It comes across on TV, and it just to me, if I'm Tony Khan, I want crowd reactions to match how wrestlers are framed. It's a sign of success. When the crowd is reacting differently to what you're doing, it's awkward. It feels like you don't have your finger on the pulse of your own fan base. And I think Hurt Business do that every week. And I don't think MVP's helping matters. I don't think they're trying to get heat. So tonight was another manifestation of that. Ian, had you attended AEW shows before?
No, this was my first one. I've been to like 10, 15 WWE shows. The last one I went to for WWE was Bad Blood. I think before COVID fully shut everything down, I think they were doing a Blood and Guts in either Nashville or Atlanta, and I was going to go to that. Mm-hmm. And then they kind of just pulled the plug on everything. So this was the first AEW show that I fully got to go to. So
as someone who's attended WWE shows, how did this feel? Like, I mean, how was the crowd different? How was the energy different? I know it's not like a major NBA, NHL type venue, and I don't know how that felt being in the building. Certainly, I'd rather be in a small building. It doesn't have to be TV friendly. Yeah. I'd rather be in a small packed building than a big cavernous building. So I think from a live experience, it might have been better than a lot of people experience when they're among 3,500 people in a 20,000 seat building. But yeah, tell me about the differences. What stood out to you between WWE and AEW as a live experience?
Yeah, that was one of the main focal points of why I wanted to go. I wanted to see what it was like in AEW event. AEW events, I gotta say, are a lot more fun than I was expecting it to be. I think smaller venues work for AEW because, you know, as you guys said earlier, you know, they're trying to gain interest back in the viewers. And I think the smaller venues work for them. And, you know, yeah, the crowd kind of wasn't into it like I was expecting. Like when Cope came out, people were kind of on Cope at first. But yeah, I mean, you know, to answer your question, it was a lot of fun compared to WWE events. I don't think AEW will touch WWE for a while. Like even the merch was kind of just when I went to the merch table. They were only selling really Hurt Syndicate stuff and Ospreay stuff. I saw maybe one Cope shirt and that was it. And even at like the during the commercial breaks, you know, WWE, they do like the sign, camera pan, they're doing stuff. Justin Roberts, God bless him, he was trying everything he can to get the crowd kind of amped up during commercial breaks. The commercial stuff didn't really work. We couldn't really hear any backstage stuff. Even when Ricochet was doing his, we couldn't hear him. We couldn't hear Mercedes Moné. We couldn't hear Tony Storm. We couldn't hear Powerhouse Hobbs. We couldn't hear nothing backstage.
Joel, could you hear them on TV? Because I thought the sound mixing was terrible through TBS, at least through my speaker. And I never think about that with WWE shows or other sports with my setup.
For the most part, it was okay. I've been watching on Max lately, which has been actually a pretty good feed. The picture that comes through has been crystal clear. It's looked really good, but not too many issues with the audio stuff. Nothing that stood out to me as far as the backstage segments.
Yeah, it came across for me as one just acoustically bad. You know, Renee and Mercedes, I think, was bad acoustics, and there was some sound mixing early on and like video packages where I had to turn on closed captioning to even hear what was being said. But that could be a TBS thing, and maybe it's better on Max. So I should check the replay and see. Ian, we asked this a lot to our on-site correspondents. Rank who seemed most over, regardless of face heel designation, male, female. Who got the biggest reactions in the building tonight? And was there like a top three? All tied, or was there a big drop off after one? Yeah, kind of give us a sense of that.
Yeah, I think Ospreay, Omega, and Hurt Syndicate got the biggest reaction. MJF, when he came out, that was a pretty big pop. We weren't expecting MJF at all. I personally wasn't expecting MJF to even show up. He got a pretty big pop, and especially when Hangman came out, he got a pretty good sized pop, but the biggest three were definitely Omega, Ospreay, and Hurt Syndicate.
What was the dead spot of the show? Was there a point where it was like, man, this shouldn't last this long, or they shouldn't have even put this out there?
I think Jamie Hayter and Julia Hart kind of went a little too long, especially the promo at the end where they're slowly dissolving the House of Black. They did a I don't know if they showed this on Max or TBS. After the Julia Hart match before the main event, they showed a video package of Julia, Buddy Matthews, and Brody King before the main event. So I don't know if they're trying to repackage them as another faction or what they're doing, but they showed a weird package of that trio before Cope and Pac had their main event.
Yeah. Joel, do you want to jump in with another question?
Yeah, so we talked about kind of fighting the headwind when it comes to the Hurt Syndicate, and you alluded to the same thing with Hangman Page. What did the crowd make of that afterwards segment there where Christopher Daniels was following up on their Texas Death Match? It just seemed to me nobody reacted to Christopher Daniels coming out there, and then just kind of Daniels putting it into Hangman's face that because of him, he's never going to wrestle again. And Hangman just kind of feeling bad about it, and wanted the camera to get out of there and move on with it. What the crowd make of all that?
Yeah, so it was pretty interesting when we saw that Daniel's Titantron came on and he came out. I was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know if they were doing like another fake retirement feud or what was going on, but the crowd didn't really seem to care much about Christopher Daniels when he came out, which sucks because I'm a Daniels fan. But
yeah, it's too bad for him.
I wasn't really paying attention to that because where I was sitting, I couldn't really see what was going on, and a lot of the wrestlers were kind of making a scurry exit out of the building. A lot of people were like, "Oh yeah, there goes her syndicate, they're leaving," and I think Ospreay and Omega were leaving as well. So a lot of fans were kind of seeing who was leaving, but yeah, fans didn't really seem to care much about the Daniels segment at the end.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Ian, anything else? By the way, if anyone in the chat wants to chime in before Ian runs too with a quick question, if there's something we didn't cover that you're curious about, I'm keeping an eye on the chat. Ian, anything else you want to share from your experience we didn't ask you specifically about?
Yeah, they did a dark match before the show. No one really seemed to care about it. It was Serpentico versus Crazy Steve, and
wait, no one cared about that?
Yeah, no one cared.
Oh,
people couldn't really get a sense of who was the face and who was the heel of the match. So people were cheering for Crazy Steve. Yeah, but people were cheering for Crazy Steve. People were cheering for Serpentico. Aubrey Edwards was trying to get some pops every now and then. No one cared about her. But yeah, I think all in all, it was a fun show. I think they could have saved the Ospreay Omega segment towards the middle of the show to kind of balance it out. But all in all, I think it was a fun show, and I'll definitely come to AEW again if they come to Knoxville.
All right, cool. Well, Ian, thanks so much for taking time to talk to us. I hope the traffic's cleared up and you got smooth ride home.
I've missed you, Wade. I've missed calling in, brother.
I know. It's nice to see you,
man. I can't call you anymore.
Just email me and let me know, and I'll send you the link.
All right, I got you, brother.
Yeah, sweet. All right, good talking to you, man.
Yeah. See you guys.
You bet.
Thanks, Ian.
Ian from Tennessee. All right. Oh, hang on. Ian, we're bringing you back on. Did Tony Khan address the crowd? The chat just asked. Sorry.
So before the show, he did come out toward like a 1 minute countdown to say, "Oh yeah, you guys are gonna have a great show and it's gonna be great." And then he runs back in the tunnel. After I don't know when the cameras cut at the end of the main event, Jay White and Cope addressed the crowd. Jay White was like, "Hey, we've never been fully introduced. I'm Switchblade Jay White, and you're like the baddest mother effer in this building." And then Jay White dropped the mic and left. Cope grabs the mic and he said, "Last time I was in Knoxville, I wrestled AJ and Rey Mysterio on a triple threat," which I thought was pretty cool because I was at that event. And he's like, "Next time AEW comes to Knoxville, I will be AEW World Champion." And then he leaves, and then Tony Khan comes out and is like, "I don't know who's old enough, but I'm a big Smoky Mountain Wrestling fan, and they always had events at this arena, and this will not be the last AEW event to come to Knoxville, Tennessee. God bless you guys. Get home safe." And then he kind of did the typical Cody Rhodes toward the end of WWE events where he tells everyone to get home safe.
Yep.
But I don't think a lot of people really care. A lot of people are kind of leaving the building when Tony Khan came out towards the end of the show.
Yeah, I was wondering if he got like a pop, like, "That's Tony Khan. We hear his name all the time." And
people were like,
great.
"Oh yeah, Tony, we love you." And they're like, they chanted AEW at the end when Tony Khan said, "We're coming back to Knoxville." So we'll see when they come back.
All right, Ian. I'm looking at the chat. No one else has a late question, so we'll let you drive. Thank you.
All right. Love you guys.
You bet. Thanks. Fun encore with an on-site correspondent. I'm glad that I didn't cause him to crash the car or something by bringing him back on.
Me too.
That's so sweet. Okay. Let's bring some chat room comments in about the Jarrett MJF segment here. Sadler version 3 says, "I just don't believe in Jarrett as a main event championship caliber guy." Understandable. Makes sense. And Corey Dallas Standing says, I'll take old Jeff Jarrett over Jon Moxley's House of Torture cosplay. We'll get into the role of the Death Riders in a bit here. And Ashley M says, I really like Karen saying she didn't like what Jeff said last week, and that wasn't him. It felt like they heard the feedback and adjusted. Definitely think that's true. I just wish they framed it more believably. She's his wife. She shouldn't be telling that to him for the first time while interrupting a promo live on national TV. That clearly was meant for us to hear what Karen had to say, and they could have recalibrated the way they presented it. I'm repeating myself, but I want to emphasize it. Those are details I think that matter. And I think Karen should have said, Jeff, sorry to interrupt your promo. I know you got limited time. I want to look at this camera and tell people what I told you all week, which that was not you. That was not my husband. Like, it solves everything. It's so weird. The wife says, the only time she can send this message is 7 days later, live interrupting a promo. Just clean that stuff up.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, so I just read that. Mark Biscetti says the fact that Jarrett is the number one is number one again speaks volumes about how lost Tony Khan is as a booker. This could have been a solid 1 week storyline, but they lost a viewer for next week. Joel, how do you think Jeff Jarrett is driving people away? Flat out.
I don't think so. It's
besides
not helpful.
Mark.
Yeah. Besides Mark, it's just definitely not helpful. It's definitely the perception where it makes it easier for a lot of the anti-AEW podcasts to poke more fun at them. That it kind of looks like these darker days of TNA where it looked like they weren't going to be in business anymore, trying to push Jeff Jarrett to the top, where they were running in the impact zone in the smaller arena. It definitely has that feeling at times. Yeah. Now, I think that there's a lot better wrestling. There's a lot more things to like about AEW than that. But certainly, when you got the guy dressed as Sting in the front row, and then you got Jeff Jarrett in the ring talking about winning the world championship, it definitely has those shades. And I don't think that you want to draw those parallels to a wrestling company at a time that was not successful.
I think Tony Khan probably is worried about anti-AEW podcasts, whoever and wherever they are. I don't think he should be. I think he should be worried about selling tickets and drawing TV ratings. There are good reasons to do things and good reasons not to do things, but what a pro-WWE anti-AEW podcast that just has a bias baked in, they're going to find something to pick on. My issue is with the open-minded people who like AEW, who are pro-AEW, or just want to see competition. They want as many good nights of wrestling as they can get. Even if you're okay with Jarrett, I think you should be concerned that, I don't know. I've met Jeff. I've talked to Jeff over the years. I don't know genuinely if he perceives himself as a genuine top-tier star, with all these world title runs, or if he sees himself realistically more the way MJF framed him, which is you're associated with dying companies and you're carny succubus, as he called him. I don't know if Jeff is just like, I'm kind of the old carny thing, which again sounds like it's derisive and it's just sort of neutral. It's just sort of the way of wrestling. A wrestler does what they can to influence a promoter to get TV time. And if that's what's going on with Jeff, he's like, I'm just getting mine. I'm just trying to get my last run. It's not my job to manage AEW's success or to decide that I deserve TV time over someone else. I'm going to make my pitch. Tony's the boss. He decided to put me on TV. I trust him. Or if Jeff really thinks he's a savior and like putting him on TV is going to make a positive difference for things. It does. How Jeff feels about himself isn't particularly relevant to the discussion. So when people make it personal and go, Jeff should know better, it's like Jeff's just doing what every wrestler, most wrestlers who are successful are kind of looking out for themselves. Hulk Hogan told me that in the interview, the Torch Talk interview I did for the Pro Torch newsletter decades ago, 25 years ago almost. He's like, I'm not going to apologize. It's a dog-eat-dog world. I paraphrase Hogan all the time. He's like, I do what I can to get my TV time and get my push, and it's up to others to make their case to the promoter and get their push. All that said, is he self-aware that people are sort of resenting him being given this much TV time at this level? I just don't know the answer to it, but I know a lot of people watching this product, sampling it, tuning in now and then, when they see MJF feuding with Jeff Jarrett, it doesn't matter the merit of the feud, if it's well constructed, if they correct course when they make an error, if Jeff is giving a seminar practically to guys in the back about body language and a lot of details that I know Jeff is proud of that he mastered from watching Jackie Fargo and Jerry Lawler over the years, who were, Jerry Lawler is still one of my all-time favorite performers. I'm not separate the artist from the art. Jerry was amazing, and Jarrett learned a lot from him. And there's a lot to learn from people like Jarrett. Just because you think, oh, he's over tanned and his hair is weird and he's old, and I mean, all whatever ad hominem attacks you might have on, or I don't like his accent. Whatever people say about him, there are things to learn from him. Last week was a bad example. This week, the correcting course was a good example of how you try to clean up a mess. But I say those compliments. He shouldn't be in a world title program, even just a TV program, getting this much TV time during a time that AEW is struggling. I know they did stuff with Buddy Matthews and Brody King, but like that felt secondary to Jeff Jarrett in his storyline. And I kind of think Buddy Matthews and Brody King are worth making seem like they're the reason to tune into Dynamite. They're just not a supporting group getting a vignette. And so that's just one example. I think AEW has a lot of young wrestlers. So anything you want to add to that, Joel, or else I'll go back to the chat and read more on this.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. I mean, the issue is that you're giving him so much TV time and trying to push him into this prominent position. You're associating MJF with him. Sure, you can get some more heat on MJF because he needs more heat to beat more veterans, but Jeff Jarrett is just not that beloved type of wrestler who's been around for a long time. He's just been he's put himself a lot in prominent positions. He's been around, and there's no doubt that, I mean, people have respect for him behind the scenes. He's helped to build this company a lot. No doubt that he is a contributing veteran in that way, but we're talking about trying to improve the perception of the company, and I just don't think that putting him in this type of position is forwarding that in any sort of way. I think it just continues this narrative of relying upon these wrestlers of yesteryear, people who were big 20 years ago. You look at the main event here, Cope, who was WWE champion, really big deal in WWE, back in 2006, 2007. Moxley even alluded that you would sleep in 2011, long time ago, to be putting these people in the main event. And then you look at some of the younger talent that they have on the roster, and so many of them seem to be in very similar positions to where they were before. Private Party being the prime example on this particular episode of Dynamite, that they really just got beaten handily by the Hurt Syndicate, guys who came from WWE, who have been largely presented like stars. And Private Party, although they held the championships, are largely the same type of same characters, same position that they were when they started in AEW. That I don't think that there's been a lot of upward mobility there, and so you got to find the right people. And so I'm reading one of the comments here from Puss Boots Cat talking about Wardlow sitting.
So he says, Wade is spot on. Jeff Jarrett has the optics of minor league, deeply uncool NASCAR wrestling. And that's the thing. Yeah. I mean, our splash words on our YouTube graphic a couple weeks ago, where as AEW lost its cool factor, Cope and Jarrett and the Pointer Sisters. And I just think that's a concern. I mean, I think that's why the crowd's popping for Hurt Business. And as Todd Martin has pointed out, it's an indictment of AEW. It reflects negatively on the job they've done creating their own stars. When Shelton Benjamin, who has a losing record, has been marginalized, whether you agree with it or not, that it should have been done, it was done. He was not a top guy very often in WWE. He was part of a tag team with Charlie Haas. He had a good match with Shawn Michaels that people talked about forever. He was seen as underrated, but he underperformed on the microphone and as a character. And there's things I've heard that I understand why sometimes he was sort of passed over for a push. They didn't look at him as somebody who was just driven to be a top guy, and it kind of that rep hung with him by people who were very driven to be top people who had power. Mm-hmm. So the fact that he's getting the biggest reactions at some of these AEW shows is not good. It's not good. Now you want Tony Storm, Mariah May, Kenny Omega, Will Ospreay, Hangman Page. You want them getting bigger pops than a mid-card, give or take, nearly fit, guy around 50 years old who has a losing record the past 20 years on national television. And so the optics are important. And it's just, you combine a lot of things. This venue, the not replace it. Maybe Tony's working on, try to not make the same mistake twice, but let's get a good opening theme, that's contemporary and cool and fits a wrestling show and fits the tone of AEW. There's just a lot of things to clean up, and Jarrett does not look cool. I mean, not to most people, I dare say, as a national figure standing in the middle of the ring. Cool's not the be all end all, but it's the totality of it all adding up. Mm-hmm. It's an issue. So Mark Piscetti says, Jeff Jarrett cannot be the center of attention for weeks in a row in 2025. It feels beyond small-time wrestling, a stark difference from how AEW was perceived only a year ago. Puss Boots Cat says, all we need now is Hermie Sadler and Toby Keith in his corner. Andrew H. bluntly says, Jeff Jarrett, human fast-forward button, then, now, forever. Sadler version 3 says, is Jeff worthy of this type of run? It just doesn't feel like he should be getting this last run type of push like Sting and John Cena.
Right.
That's where I get to the Carney thing. I think Jarrett went to Tony and said, I got an idea. I'm a veteran. I'm smart.
It could be.
The way the crowd reacted to the Owen Cup. Let's do this. And, we got to give MJF something to do when he's not with a top contemporary guy. Let me do a 4, 5, 6 week program on TV with a blow off, and they maps it out, and it makes sense. And it, in the end, we'll look and go, that was well mapped out, and with some exceptions, well executed.
Yeah,
that can all be true, and it can also be the wrong thing to be putting as a centerpiece program, taking up a lot of TV time in January 2025 with AEW's problems. So Jarrett can be sincere in a pitch and execute it well at the same time, it ultimately isn't good for the product.
Yeah, and I think that's entirely possible, that there was a pitch like that. But when you compare that to their competitors in WWE and New Japan, they're all kind of doing a similar story at this point of kind of their last year run. And that's how Jeff Jarrett framed this a few weeks ago on Dynamite, is I signed my last wrestling contract for 1 year. I want to win the world title. Then you have John Cena on Raw cutting something similar, that this is my last year, talks about the world title, going to the Royal Rumble. John Cena is a major A-list movie star. You have New Japan with Tanahashi. This is his last year, his last run. He's going to retire next year at the Tokyo Dome. And when you compare John Cena, Tanahashi, and then you're doing something similar with a lot of TV time, it's not like it's just kind of a smaller on the side thing on their smaller shows. And you compare those, that's going to make you look small time.
Yeah, exactly. So Zach Barber, PWTorch contributor, he does an excellent write-up. The AEW Feud Tracker drops every Tuesday night or Wednesday. It is worth your time to read it. He does a great job just putting out there not only just kind of an overview of what's going on with the top feuds in AEW, but his opinion on them, and he grades them. Recommend people read it. He and I go back and forth a lot because he looks at the bright side of AEW, has a reputation. Some thought he was Tony Khan in disguise until he showed up on the show, and definitely was not Tony Khan. He super chatted to emphasize he wanted this read. I think you're missing the point. Jeff Jarrett's not going to challenge for the title. The point is for MJF to crush his dream and retire him. So, Zach, that can be true. Yeah. It might be true ultimately that's the case. It doesn't change the fact that the storyline is Jeff Jarrett, for weeks in a row now, is getting center ring extensive promo time, selling the idea that fans want him to get a shot at the world title, that they will be behind this story that's similar, as you say, Joel, to John Cena, of a big star with one last run. I mean, that is the presupposition of this whole thing, is that people will care enough about Jarrett to be into this so that there'll be heat on MJF when he takes it away from him. So if you're right, Zach, and MJF takes away his title shot by costing the match against Claudio next week, therefore he doesn't get the match against Moxley, if that's the way it goes and that's one route, it does not change the fact that for it to work, you have to believe that fans will be upset with MJF for ending Jarrett's quest at age 57 to get another title shot. In the argument very clearly being made on this show from everybody else but you, Zach, is people aren't going to be disappointed if Jarrett gets knocked out of the title run because of MJF. And that's the problem. is you're investing in a storyline where the heat on the heel is not going to put heat on the heel in the way that the storyline is being presented. Joel, is that a fair framing of it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, next week in Huntsville, Alabama, that's Conrad Thompson's, area. And that's, he's got his podcast with all those guys and with Jeff Jarrett. So you might get a better reaction there if MJF is to interfere into that match. But, I just don't think that you can stretch this out for this long extended time and have people really care about Jeff wanting to go for the title. But you're right. It could just be, maybe they have a blow off at Grand Slam Australia and have MJF face Jeff Jarrett there. And hopefully they go 7-8 minutes.
Yeah. And he may get a title shot. He may not. My point is whether he does or doesn't, AEW and Jeff Jarrett are selling us with a straight face that fans are invested in Jarrett's journey. Yeah. So whatever course they take, the argument isn't what Zach is saying, which is the point is for MJF to crush his dream and retire him. You have to add to that, Zach, and I believe fans will be mad at MJF for that. And I believe that'll be worth the TV time and what it displaced. Joel, I talk all the time on the show about minutes on NBA teams. There's an 8-man rotation with the Wolves, maybe 9. And there's only so many minutes to go around. And there's fans who want to see some of the younger guys get more time. The coach just wants to win now. And they also know there's top paid players. This is their prime. They've earned it. And there is merit in winning. And there's some exceptions where they go certain teams, even without injuries, go very deep on to the bench in terms of spreading the minutes out. But when you have big star players who are hungry for TV time and points and play good defense, they get the lion's share of the minutes and somebody else doesn't get them. Someone is displaced every time someone plays 40 minutes. Anthony Edwards plays like the 3rd most minutes in the NBA, but he's in his prime, he's young, but that means some other players that fans like get less time. Jeff Jarrett is eating up court time. There's limited time every week. So you can say, well, here's the defense of it, but the defense of it has to incorporate into what it's displacing. What is the opportunity cost? I threw out Brody King and Buddy Matthews as an example. You can come up with a lot of examples. There are other things that they could be putting on that would have a bigger cool factor, more of an upside, less of a turnoff factor, less of sort of a veteran manipulating the promoter for one last run, doing kind of the Carney bit. This might have been Tony Khan's idea, and Jeff's like, I don't want to do it. And Tony's like, no, I insist. I mean, Joel, we can look at it either way, and I haven't inquired about that. But it's what it's displacing that's a part of the story, not just the merit of it that you might be able to rationalize.
Yeah, we keep hearing the argument that they have so many people on the roster and they just don't have enough TV time. They don't have enough time to get everybody over. And that's what I'm saying is that you're relying upon a lot of these people from the past to carry these major segments on your A show. When you look up and down on this card, there's a lot of that. Now there's people who have come from gotten over in other promotions, but I think that AEW really needs to focus more on it takes time. It's not going to happen right away. It's not going to develop into ratings right now, but how can you strategically look at the booking and putting some of those younger talents and be like, they're here today, but at this point, we want them to be elevated to this point. And it is going to take some time. You have to identify those talents. And it's much easier said than done. But I think that creating that perception, when you get a lot younger and you have more people who feel like you're watching this upward trajectory for them, you're latching onto that journey now versus watching kind of some of that post-career of stuff. And right now, AEW, for some guys, kind of just feels like it's in a lull. It feels like they've peaked at it to a certain point. Doesn't mean it's not over for them, but you want to get it back to where it feels like they're on this upward trajectory. I mean, it feels like Kenny Omega, for a lot of his stuff, we've seen some of the best matches, and I think he's still got a lot more to deliver, but it feels like, we've seen kind of the biggest points for him. I hope there's more, but right now, the feeling is that it's not like that. Whereas you feel that for Ospreay, that's why he gives people so much hope, is that's like he's still in the prime of his career. He's still athletically there, and there's still a lot more to be seen with his wrestling legacy that can be defined within AEW. Whereas a lot of other wrestlers, it's been defined in either WWE or other promotions, and they've gotten over elsewhere.
Exactly. Yep. And the wrestlers being on journeys is important, but who is on the journey and where it fits into the greater context is important. If Jeff Jarrett was the only way past his prime, most often at his age, retired veteran. And again, I'm saying that as a fact. It doesn't mean he still can't deliver in the ring, can't deliver on the microphone, doesn't look good. He brings a lot that is better than a lot of 57-year-olds, but he's not the only guy who's quite old getting TV time. I mean, Christopher Daniels was an ROH headliner 15 plus years ago, and a TNA sort of headliner, with AJ Styles, but he was always kind of the third, fourth guy after Joe.
20 years ago for both TNA and more than that for ROH.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I'm understating it when I'm estimating this. So you have that, and then you have Copeland, who, if you got one, it's like you don't have to have one giant, one luchador, one underdog skinny guy, and one veteran, but it's usually the right idea. Not the luchador thing, because you can have plenty of them if you're a open-minded and worldly booker. You can find a way to give distinct personalities to mass luchadors that isn't based entirely around the fact that they're a mass luchador whose father also wrestled. And that's like the beginning and end of most personality depth charts for how American English-speaking promoters feature luchadors, and they should find they're real people who are different from one another. That should be accentuated. That's a side topic, but Terry Funk in ECW, in the original ECW pre-WWF WW bout, he was their veteran. 911 was their giant. Mikey Whipwreck was the hapless but lovable underdog. It could go on. That's you have too much of the same thing, and it is displacing other things that are important. Okay, more chat here. Mark Biscotti says, for a 1 week story, sure, this much TV time will never pay off. In response to Zach Barber saying MJF's going to cost him the title shot, Sadler version 3 says, Zach, I'd be surprised if Jeff doesn't get a title shot. I think he surely beats Claudio, maybe by fluke, and then MJF probably costs him the title match. And I do think that's more likely, but I wouldn't rule out, whether it's the plan or an audible, that he never gets a title shot. Maybe just to satisfy I don't know if satisfy is the word, but to placate the critics and kind of pull the plug a little bit early on the experiment. And I don't know the answer to this, but 27 Newsmen says, why is Double J's mustache mustard yellow? There's a lot of weird, unnatural colors on wrestlers' hair and faces these days through hair coloring and spray tanning. And there doesn't seem to be mirrors and selfies for wrestlers to tone down some of the spray tan. And it's across the board. This isn't picking up.
Yeah. Jeff and MJF, they could have gone back and forth about that last week,
Yes.
instead of talking about each other's girlfriends and wives.
Yes. Andrew H says, Zach, you're missing the point. We don't need to see an AARP spokesman when AEW is stacked with young, viable talent. And, and Joel, the question is AEW is not tanking for a draft pick like in the NBA when you play young guys, but they should be in the player development business always. Especially when what you're putting in that place is Jeff Jarrett. And whatever the rationalization is for Jarrett getting this much TV time and feuding with MJF, and however the story ends, and however competently or strategically booked it is, it does not change the fact that it is displacing other things that AEW could be doing in terms of player development, holding up air quotes, to let fans know there's these young, exciting wrestlers you can relate to who are on a journey. Yes, Sting was a story we're telling. Jeff Jarrett is not Sting. Jeff Jarrett is not John Cena. And when AEW frames him that way, and when Jarrett frames him that way and says, MJF, I've done everything you've done. No. Nobody thinks Jeff Jarrett was that edgy heel that MJF is. It's just it's what? So, anyway, let's see. I've gone past the chat comments that were mentioned earlier, but now I'm scrolling to the ones that were happening while we were talking. Zach's not wrong, by the way, when he says Cena's been checked out of the business for many years now.
That is true. Yeah.
But Andrew H says John Cena at his worst day is far more important to pro wrestling than Jeff Jarrett. Cena has made this his year. Yeah. Cena can be checked out and still be exponentially a bigger star worthy of TV time at 2025.
And he's effective. Yeah, he's effective. He's moved tickets. I mean, provably, he's moved tickets within the last few years when he's come back here. So he is very much a big deal, and the exposure that he gets all over the place. I mean, it's not even close.
Yeah, and by the way, Joel, I can put you on AEW Dynamite. You can be really checked in. Doesn't mean you deserve TV time over other people. Like,
that's true.
Me too. Like, I mean, the idea that the argument is Jarrett's checked in and Cena's not. There's a lot of 57-year-old ex-wrestlers who would love to get national TV time, who will be all checked in for us. Doesn't mean that they deserve TV time over a guy who's checked out, but is recognizable walking down the street on any major street in this world right now. John Cena has made it.
He's on the menu. He's on all the McDonald's stuff now. Now he's the face of McDonald's.
Yep.
The largest fast food chain.
Yes,
he's everywhere.
King of strong style. Just feels like this is a waste of time and bad John Cena ripoff. Jeff Jarrett's always been a jobber in AEW. I can't forget that just because you want to push him for a few weeks. Sadler version 3, the crowd will be at least 50-50 in a Jarrett MJF match, and that shouldn't be the case in a feud with an older retiring guy versus a young cocky wrestler story. The crowd may even favor MJF more. You wonder if MJF's strategy is I want to get, I hope not, because he's a heel. He wants to get booed. But if he's like, I'm going to be more over than Jarrett, and that's going to make me look good. All right. Let's see. Fanblast says, regarding Double J, ratings have increased the past 3 weeks in a row. Just saying. Yes, because they aired on Christmas and New Year's. Come on, Fanblast. Read my ratings reports. We'll put things in proper perspective for you. 27 Newsman, though, says, Jarrett can talk and tell a story. Kenny gets mic time and his words are awkward. Moxley growls and makes no sense. Maybe Jarrett isn't cool, but at least he can talk and make sense. That's true. I mean, that's what complicates this, Joel, is Jarrett is good in certain respects at doing this. And if you focus just on that, you go, well, he deserves TV time. Except it's Jeff Jarrett. And it's displacing other things. He can teach guys. He can be on Collision on a mid-card feud, and then he can say, watch back the tape. Here's why you should learn from me. And he can say that, and he should be listened to. But this is a world title level feud.
Yeah. It's being put on Dynamite. Dynamite's the A show. That's where all the stuff that matters is on AEW. For AEW is on the Dynamite show. I mean, if this was even on Collision with somebody other than MJF, I mean, it would be a much different conversation. But this is on your main show that we're already talking about. There's just not enough time for everybody else to get their stuff in.
Yeah. SF Niners fan 23 says Jarrett should be on ROH helping the young guys like Lee Johnson get ready for the next level. And that might be where he ends up next. It might be. All right. Let's see. AW feels like an oldies cover band when they drag out Jeff Jarrett, says Puss Boots Cat. Zach Barber, though, says Jarrett's earned my respect. He's been through a lot and become a better person. That's great. You can do that off air. He can be a good person off air. So, Dennis Decline, says JJ isn't Funk in ECW, but it feels like that's how they want him to be perceived. Very true. Like he's getting Terry Funk treatment. And he's not Terry Funk. 27 Newsman said, I never cared for Jarrett, but I got to like him because of his podcast. Now I don't mind seeing him on AEW. So, there we go. Okay. So we'll pause the Jarrett. Pause or conclude the Jarrett conversation here. We'll talk about some other things. This is kind of sidebar, but Final Boss Engage says, hi, Wade. A lot of folks online attacking Wade over the Britt Baker story. Does Wade have any thoughts on the matter? Thanks. All I know, I haven't read what anyone has said about my report. It was news to me when Rich Fan said we should talk about the reaction online from aggregators to your Keller hotline. I stand by what I said. Like the first 3 sentences and the last 3 sentences clearly said, put in context, she's not fired. I said she might be back. I just said they're, for the moment, frustrated with her and they are not talking. And it could be a while and it might be never. I mean, like, whatever. I reported something very different than what aggregators did in the game of telephone. I had people texting me saying, wait, I can't believe, Dave and Brian, they didn't even know what you said because they're reacting to something you didn't say. On their show. It just, like, I mean, honestly, like just subscribe, listen to my report, and then talk to me about it. If you're going to react to or think that what aggregators paraphrase or what people online then start saying I said when it's not what I said. I don't have time for that. And that's what a lot of this was. So stand by my story. Nobody in AEW has pushed back on my framing of it. And I'm not going to answer to things I didn't say because other people inaccurately quoted me. I just say, pay for a VIP membership and listen to what I say, and don't waste your time with aggregators. We're going to get stories wrong, which happens time after time after time after time when it comes to stuff, not just I report, but others. The truth is out there, but it's not the fifth Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox of something that you can listen to and know actually what I said in the context, the tone, the tenor, the framing of it. Everything is there for you. So why are you wasting your time on social media and reading aggregator sites with some person who's just answering to some editor who wants clicks? There's no accountability for accuracy. They just want clicks to make their money. And the people running the show who they're answering to are people who buy a bunch of sites and on a lot of different topics, and all they are is a factory for SEO aggregator clickbait. And social media is a bunch of people who might earnestly be thinking they're saying something that I said and I didn't. So that's what I have to say to that. That's my 2 minute, 3 minute, however long that was, little mini rant on it. Joel?
Yeah, I mean, well said, Wade. I mean, I've, of course, have seen what other people have said on it, that they've glommed onto your report, because there's always been something that seemed really weird with Britt Baker over the past year of just a lot of, with her injury and stuff that she talked about, and just not a lot of information that's been out about her, that, of course, something like that, what you reported, gets blown up into a bigger thing. And that's unfortunately just kind of the world that we live in as far as media, is that people don't go to the direct source to find out more information about that it's kind of blown up. People take your words, twist it into that she's gone from AEW because that's the flashier headline. But I'll ask you, Wade, since you said that and things kind of got blown out of proportion, is there any other additional information that you've heard about that, or anything more that you want to add to it?
I don't have any new reporting on it, but I did hear things that I was asked not to say. And I talked about that in my Keller Hotline report, that I heard some details, but not enough that I felt comfortable going with them. But I don't think there's been any new developments. I mean, I think I nailed the story, and that was Friday, I think. And it's 5 days later, nothing's changed.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, do you have any specific questions, like based on what I actually reported and what people are perceiving it as?
I mean, people are perceiving it as that she's just done, that she's done with, people are perceiving that now she's been thrown into like the bin of the Ricky Starks, where it just seems like we're never going to see them again on television.
I think she's probably in a similar realm of Ricky Starks. It doesn't mean the ending will be the same. I honestly, I could totally see, because of this blow up, her trying to figure out how to make things better. I could see someone in AEW trying to reach out and talk her into making things better. This might draw attention. Sometimes there's people who care about each other and have a long relationship, and they just won't address an issue, and then something happens and it finally gets addressed. There's some things that need to be addressed, as I talked about in the Wade Keller Hotline for VIP members that people can listen to. It's out there. It was at the 11-minute mark of a 22-minute update, and I talked about it for 2 minutes. I didn't really treat it as like a breaking story. I just was like, hey, here's an update on what's going on with Britt Baker, because she hasn't been on TV for whatever it was, 2.5 months.
Yeah.
It was just an update that there were some issues with her. That MJF situation was part of it. The Adam Cole situation I reported is not part of why she's not on TV. I wanted to clear that up. And there were new situations and that led to frustrations.
Yeah.
That led to, as I reported, Tony Khan and people in AEW going, we have a deep women's division. Let's put our focus on some people who I don't want to speak about things that I was asked not to talk about, but they want to prioritize other people based on their interactions with Britt over the last month or so.
I mean, people are really glomming on to when Serena Deeb came out, that I believe either it was said or it was mouthed. I don't want to get this wrong, but it seemed like she said, "Who cares?" When Serena Deeb came out. And then when Serena Deeb then wrestled a couple weeks later, she had a shirt that said, "Who cares?"
So elaborate on the context of that.
Okay, so when they set up that match between Britt Baker and Serena Deeb, this would have been in November, mid-November at some point. and I could be wrong on this, but my understanding was that she either mouthed or it was heard on TV that she said, "Who cares?" when Serena Deeb came out.
Gotcha.
And then Serena Deeb then wrestled on Collision. I want to say a few weeks later, maybe it was the December 7th Collision, and she had a shirt on that said, "Who cares?"
Yeah. I report on the Wade Keller hotline. Somebody said that nobody in the women's locker room would be sad if Britt Baker doesn't return.
Okay.
But I also said that that's not necessarily true, that somebody could go online and multiple people could go, and I care about Britt and from the women's locker room. I'm just saying someone who talked to me felt that she was unpopular enough and not missed enough to say that nobody in the women's locker room would be sad she was there. May or may not be true, but I quoted a source of mine saying that. Also, again, in my report, which I encourage people to actually listen to instead of wasting your time with derivatives, fifth Xerox copies and the game of telephone, because people spend in hours, like I'm spending way too much time on this. People spend hours talking with their friends about something that someone said, I said, or that I didn't say. And it's like, why waste your time? Just listen, report, and move on with your day. I stand by what I said. She has had a bad reputation for years, but being fiercely protective of her place in the locker room. It's something we've talked about on podcasts for years. This isn't like breaking news that she's not popular in certain circles in AEW. It's not breaking news that she's difficult to work with. It's not breaking news that she stands up for herself in ways that is abrasive and rubs people the wrong way in positions of power and colleagues. We know there have been so many stories. I don't even think this was big news, so I don't know how people take from it that she'll never be back and like she's fired. It's like this took on a life of its own that is feels, from what I'm hearing other people are saying, is so disconnected from the 2 minutes I spent on it, from the 11 to 13 minute mark in a 22-minute hotline that I didn't even think was headline worthy, and put tons of context and tone behind it that put it in perspective what I was saying. It's an example of what a waste of time pro wrestling news on social media can be sometimes when people don't just read or listen to the initial source report.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the opening brawl with Kenny Omega, or the face-to-face, heavily advertised, by the way, and rightfully so, with Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega. That led to a big wild brawl with the Don Callis family. I want to focus first on the way that Omega and Ospreay presented themselves. I think one worthy compliment, first of all, is that I thought Will Ospreay's good on the mic, just being Will. I think the more Will's just Will, that's good. He's just an earnest, affable, likable, regular guy who's mega talented. And I think there's a way to just say that's who he is, and let's lean on that and market that. Kenny Omega has come across during 6 years of AEW as a rather unserious person who is otherwise mega talented and was a star in Japan and is worth buying pay-per-views to see these matches that he's in, until he's too beat up to wrestle, which has happened multiple times. This was a more serious person. This was Kenny showing up and saying, I'm a highly paid centerpiece lead babyface world title contender on a national cable show, and I ought to try to cut a good promo. He's never going to be as good on the mic as he is in the ring having matches. But it felt like he tried rather than just giving up. There wasn't meta stuff. There wasn't shock. It felt like, hey, I'm here to tell the story about Will Ospreay. So that's a strength. The negative is that Ospreay said you tried to break my neck, or Omega said you tried to break my neck. Ospreay said you're a little prick. And 10 minutes later, because they get in a fight, they decide Kenny says, I should have listened to you, and now I want to fight side by side with you. I felt that was, I wish we had a little bit more of a nuanced journey to get from, if they were going to be at that landing point, pull back a little bit on the accusations and insults at the beginning, Joel. Yeah. Or if you're going to do that at the beginning, then let's have Tony Schiavone sit down with the two of them in a sit-down promo next week and go, hey, guys, you have a common enemy. You fought side by side. The fans want to see you together, but you two still can't look each other in the eye and talk through your differences. Why is that? Like, to me, the next Collision or Dynamite should have had that before Kenny just declared. I think they like the visual of standing on the truss and announcing the match.
For sure.
So yeah. They went for the visual of the moment rather than more logical story.
Yeah, I like that they've had quite a few weeks of this versus them just, shaking hands after the brawl and being together, that they tried to tell a story with this. And so this was not perfect in execution, but I think it was effective in getting to where they wanted to go and setting up this match for Grand Slam Australia. And Kenny he was very strong in his language. So I like that he called back upon their match. Anytime that they can do callbacks to make things seem important, that seemed like a very important match at the time. Talking about that screwdriver from Will Ospreay. But I think that, you could have worded it a little bit differently. You mentioned that Tony Schiavone could have been used more effectively. I think AEW could do a better job of having these mediators being more effective in driving it in the certain directions that they want to go, to really asking those characters to think from a different perspective versus them just grabbing the mic and saying what they want to say and kind of just walking over them. Jim Ross was very effective at that when they would do those sit-down interviews, those pre-tape stuff with him. And so I think I would have more gone for something of that direction, but certainly they wanted to have a big brawl here and get Takeshita and Fletcher involved in this. But it was definitely a 180 for Omega to feel so strongly about this. It's also kind of weird from his promo talking about that he's not here to get revenge, and then he immediately attacks Don Callis, and then mentioned this past stuff with Will Ospreay. And then they climb up the truss, and that presents a good visual for that. Little odd, I thought. It was kind of awkward, but Kenny has struggled with striking the right tone when he's in AEW. It's something weird. It's like when he goes across the Pacific, he knows like the right tone to strike as far as his presentation, his attire, just the cadence in which he talks is a very different Kenny Omega that feels very mystical. Because of the way he then has those great matches. And then when he comes to America in AEW, it does feel more, he still is a major star, but he blends in more to feel like another person on the roster. And obviously you want to avoid that with him being out for so long, that you want him to feel much elevated, that he is this major star, because they need big stars coming into the promotion who are in their prime right now. So I felt like they got to where they wanted to be, but at the same time, I wanted to see them get over to Takeshita and Fletcher a little bit more. And it just feels like they more or less have felt like the lackeys almost for Don Callis in this, where it has felt more like it's more like about Don Callis. I understand he is kind of the one in the middle of this, but in this whole thing, obviously you have Omega Ospreay, who you would like to see them more get elevated to a main event position. But at the same time, you want to have Takeshita and Fletcher feeling like they're on the upswing here, and they have felt more like they're just kind of the heels getting beat up during this. They have felt more at the same position of Lance Archer and Brian Cage.
Boy, that's not good. If that, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but yeah, like to just be Archer and Cage as opposed to two centerpiece. And that's when you talk about who Jeff Jarrett is displacing. Like it was the Kyle Fletcher show for a little while there. Why?
And he slid back down, since then. Yeah.
Don Callis. I think Don Callis is overrated.
Okay.
But I also think he should be on TV every week talking. Like I think some people put him on a pedestal that he hasn't earned yet. But I think he could earn. I think he gets credit for something he hasn't done yet, which is being a great manager of this era. But I think he's capable of it. But that means showing up every week to work with something to say and being a weekly presence. I know what it's like to be a wrestling fan, watching a great manager be on TV every single week. I grew up with Bobby the Brain Heenan. I saw Jim Cornette at his peak in the 80s. Saw Paul Heyman at various peaks over the years. Jimmy Hart was like in Memphis, way better than the caricature became in WWF, but even in WWF. Managers should be a weekly Skandar Akbar and World Class Championship Wrestling with Devastation Incorporated. Like, when you think about the AEW brand, if you're going to have a heel manager and it's a good heel manager managing main event people who are taking on main event baby faces, they should be on every week. Mm-hmm. Or, like 5 out of 6 weeks, 4 out of 6 weeks at least. I'll negotiate the every week part of it a little bit. And that's not happening. And Jeff Jarrett displaces that from happening in theory. Yeah. So to me, I want Don Callis standing out there selling me on Kyle Fletcher and Takeshita in particular, The way Paul Heyman sold us on Roman Reigns in the Bloodline. The way Heyman sold us on Brock Lesnar. The way Jim Cornette sold us on the Midnight Express. The way Bobby Heenan sold us pre-WWF on Nick Bockwinkel. And that's not happening. And it's just basic fundamental formula that is timeless. You want your heel manager talking up his top guys every week. And instead, we spent the first hour of the show talking about Jeff Jarrett and MJF, and the last week was spent pillaring the self-indulgent, overly long, verbose segment last week with a bunch of gutter talk and stuff that was out of character. So I'm revisiting it now. See, I want to talk about Kyle Fletcher and Takeshita and Don Callis in particular being a big threat. When Archer and Cage became a team, they should have been winning matches, just plowing through people every week, and they should have been tag champs. Yeah. And by the way, if that was the case, they could be heel. Forget the Private Party thing. They could have destroyed Private Party early on and then been dominant champions. And then you could have Hurt Business, who the fans love, being the saviors to stop us. And you got MVP as a babyface. He cuts babyface promos anyway. I don't know if he knows how to do a heel promo. He knows how to be a self-promoter and sort of a caricature mode, but he doesn't actually get heat on himself and his guys. So let him be a babyface manager, because that's what his natural resting face is, so to speak, as a manager. People love Lashley and Shelton. They could be feuding with Archer and Cage right now, and Archer and Cage could be credible. And that could be a match you can headline a TV show or even build to a pay-per-view on. That's what gets displaced when Jeff Jarrett gets this much TV time. So again, we can come up with all kinds of examples, but so Callis could be managing them and talking. Well, Fletcher and Takeshita are going after singles titles or going after Ospreay and Omega, and it just does. It feels like Fletcher and Takeshita aren't where they ought to be. And that there's this start-stop aspect to Tony Khan and his booking. You know, it's like he's got 2 to 3 weeks of something in him, and then, boy, it takes a real effort to not have him then go to something else. Or he chooses, or you have the wrestlers who are really, like MJF can make his case. MJF and Tony Khan talk a lot. MJF's like, he gets all the TV time, but then he gets too much TV time. You know what I mean? Like, then we get the whole Adam Cole and the Roderick Strong house prisoner story. I mean, all the double stuff, and it can be overdone. Yeah. And that's where it's leadership.
Yeah. I can't disagree with that. It's a big deal that Omega and Ospreay are teaming with each other. I mean, this is their version of the Mega Powers. This is a very big deal for this type of fan base. But I think that there's more you can get out of it, and there's more segments you can dedicate to it than what they've been doing. Now, they haven't totally stuck the landing with the Ospreay Omega, but like I said, it's been effective. I can't say it's been bad. I've enjoyed most of the stuff they do, but yeah, there's a couple things I would change here and there, like we mentioned, it a little bit, but at the same time, I would be continuing to really get over Fletcher and Takeshita and really pushing them as a big deal, really credible threats, making a big deal that they are tagging together. You look at the presentation of Takeshita in New Japan, and now granted, New Japan just doesn't have as much of a roster of guys who can really go at the high level, who are those big stars. But really, the way Takeshita is presented there already, I mean, he's one of their biggest stars. I mean, he's going to be headlining their biggest show in America against Tanahashi here. And you're telling me that you can't do something similar with him on AEW?
So, yes, exactly. By the way, Paul Scott in the chat says there's a serious lack of leadership in AEW. Tony looks worse every day. I want to know, when we talk about Takeshita and Kyle Fletcher, we should in our mind be able to conjure up the dynamic and relationship that Fletcher and Takeshita have with each other, just as we can Jimmy Uso and Jey Uso and Roman Reigns, Paul Heyman and Sami Zayn and the Usos. There was that's every connective line to everybody that you could talk to a fan who was watching WWE every week. And the only people who are critical of the Bloodline storyline are people who didn't watch it every week. Because the people who watched it every week saw every week thought was put into, let's firmly establish what the dynamic is between these two wrestlers and this group of 5 or 6 people who are getting a lot of TV time, and everybody had a relationship. And every time you could rewatch Bloodline segments and see body language, facial twitches, Solo Sikoa being arms crossed, and he wouldn't do anything, and then he'd react a little bit. Like Batista was great at that in Evolution. You could be watching Triple H and Ric Flair. Batista's off to the side, and he's the one stealing the show because he would do nothing except raise an eyebrow or little like double take. You're like, ooh, Batista thought something there. And that mattered more than Ric Flair yelling and getting red-faced and jumping up and down. So to me, that's the stuff that's missing that would make Callis as good as the people who tout him contend he is, which is let's put yourself on TV where we can do that. I want to know the Fletcher to Keshta dynamic. Are they jealous of each other? Are they supportive of each other? Is one more of a leader, or are they equals? Does one look up to the other? Do they have similar competing aspirations? Is one deferential to the other? Is one closer to Don Callis? Like, there's so many things they can be telling us every single week about the dynamic with that group. And nobody puts any thought into it. No, that doesn't make air. And that's modern day wrestling. You have to be doing that if you want to get people to tune in every week. Tony Khan's figured out by opening the show with this segment. It's an example of him figuring out you can't just ring a bell and have high spots. That's not going to draw a big audience. But you need to put the right people on top and give them TV time and tell compelling stories. 3 weeks from now, we should feel different by knowing more about the dynamic of the Don Callis family than we know today. I almost, based on history, there's no chance that's true. They think their work is done. Don Callis manages these people. They show up and they brawl. Sometimes they get a solo promo, sometimes not. There's no more layering. There's no nuance. There's no dynamic there. Totally. There's so much more to get out of a professional the portrayal of a heel faction like this. And it genuinely doesn't seem like it crosses the mind of anybody from Tony Khan to Don Callis in that company that there should be every 3 to 6 weeks, we should know significantly more than we did 3 to 6 weeks ago and be able to talk about it on a show like this or with our friends. And that's just not part of AEW's booking. There's no layering.
Yeah.
There's no journey.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Joe. We got that with Danielson. An example is what we saw with Danielson and Hangman. More of that. Whether you think Danielson should get TV time, Danielson said something to Hangman, and Hangman's like, oh, okay, that frames it differently. Maybe I have some regrets over, maybe I misinterpreted. Maybe I didn't see what, like, that's like two people. Now I think differently about the dynamic today than I did yesterday. That's the kind of thing I'm asking for, but pick the right people and the right storylines. Go ahead, Joe. Sorry for jumping at you.
Having more nuance to the storylines versus just presenting, brawling, announcing matches,
and tropes,
having matches,
and
tropes,
yelling, and calling people bitch and meta comments and social media buzzwords
and all that stuff. Yes.
Weapons, scissors and plastic bags and screwdrivers. Come on.
Yes. And so it very much reminds me of a lot of the when they came out with their video game Fight Forever, where it just didn't have these layers to it. It was just kind of your basics of, you got the rosters, you're able to see the rest of the characters on there, you're able to do some of the match types and have the weapons in there, but it just wasn't layered at all. And when that game came out, it was very much like, this is similar to a lot of AEW booking where, you can, if you want to have your matches and have fun doing that, sure. But after a while, it becomes monotonous. It kind of becomes a lot of repetitive stuff over and over. Whereas you're looking for things to be multi-layered, those video games where you can really dig deep and do different things, more customization. There's that gripping story that's got that nuance of, oh my gosh, I can't, people think of like The Last of Us, which is a masterpiece type of game. And it's not because it had this great gameplay, but the story was so gripping and brought you into it. And then they made a great HBO series out of it. It's just having those multi-layers to it versus just like what people would think of wrestling of, hey, here's all the weapons and tropes and all the stuff that you said. Yeah.
So some people in chat commenting on what we're just talking about here. Let me read. Sadler Version 3 says, I actually like Callis. I actually like Callis. He feels like the only true heel on the show. My problem with him is he doesn't cheat enough in his clients' matches. Zach Barber says, so Joel, should Fletcher and Takeshita just beat up an Omega and Ospreay every week? Zach, you have look up false premises that you refute. you like someone will make a point and then you'll kind of frankly dumb it down to something they're not saying and then say, see, I proved my point by making you respond to something that they're not actually saying. Joel, are you saying that Fletcher Takeshita should just beat up Omega and Ospreay every week? Because I didn't hear that.
Well, that's actually what I did say, Wade. No, I'm kidding. I mean, that was my point, is that you need the layering of those characters and how it's like you should be really building it. Like you talked about the dynamic of those two. And it's like you can have this story about Omega and Ospreay and how big of a deal that is. But at the same time, have the serious, credible threat and be building these up. these guys up. Come on. It's not like they're facing R-Truth and The Miz, right? When John Cena and The Rock are getting together, that was a really big deal. And the whole thing was about them. And it didn't even matter who they were facing. But I'm saying you have this opportunity with these guys who are not like that whatsoever. Being R-Truth, The Miz compared to Fletcher and Takeshita, not even the same level, where you can really get over Takeshita and Fletcher as a credible threat, as to say, there's a chance Takeshita and Fletcher could win, Yeah.
Zach says Callis has been on TV every week since Kenny's comeback. Let me clarify. Standing. I mean, actually, today there was stuff where he came out, he was brave, and then he ran, and then he was brave again, and all that. I mean, so you can tell.
We saw that before. Yep.
Yeah, that's the thing. We're seeing a little. What I want is a variety of things, but like sit down promo. I want an actual Renee promo. Renee Paquette promo, where it's like wrestling was built on that, and there's certain things that have expired and won't work anymore. One of them isn't having a heel manager who can talk with his whole faction standing by him, being interviewed by a good interview backstage almost every week, talking about the latest developments, their latest thoughts, and getting heat. Not every promo needs to be 6 or 12 minutes. You can have a good 45-second to 2.5-minute promo backstage with the same people every week, and they should have something new to say based on the latest developments. It's a way to it's sort of in an exposition way, like, tie in what happened on Collision without a video package or Excalibur trying to catch us up on it, where Cal's going to go, after what happened Saturday, and then you kind of explain it a little bit, but not too much. This is how we feel different than something got advanced since the last time we were on Dynamite. Use that promo to advance things. So I want to hear from Callis. And again, I don't want to say that we could shuffle Don Callis' appearances the last 2 months and then not be able to put them in order simply by watching them. Like there's a level of, sort of repetitiveness, genericness to some of what, not all, but quite a bit of what's done. It's like Callis comes out and then it's his guy. So that, I think I explained since Zach made that comment more of what I'm looking for, but every week or two, there should be we should know more about the dynamic and more about the individual aspirations of these wrestlers. It just, that's the business these days. King of Strong Style said the Bloodline story is great. Look at how many people it helped get over. Jey Uso's a megastar because of that story. Sadler version 3 says, I actually don't mind Takeshita and Fletcher not having chemistry. The faction feels like a random bad guys hired to do Callis' dirty work, which fits Callis' character. That is, you're not going to end up with draws. And Kyle Fletcher has a chance to be a top drawing heel. Takeshita has a chance to be a main event, era-defining for AEW heel if they aren't just random bad guys hired by Callis. I don't even think Archer and Cage, despite how they've been defined down for years, Joel, should be random bad guys doing Callis' dirty work. I want to get to know them. I want to know that when you have a faction, part of what makes a faction work is the dynamic between everybody, the way they react to what the other person is saying, and what is the hierarchy. That's how you do splits and breakups when you have a long-established dynamic. Like I think it was Todd talking on the Fix this week about the intrigue of what's going on with Solo walking out and Jacob Fatu taking the microphone. Is that a flipping of power in the new bloodline? Is Solo, by losing, did he lose some of his leverage? And now he doesn't have anything to say, so he's wandering off. Jacob Fatu's now stepping up. That's a shift in the dynamic, and that's interesting for us as viewers. And that may not be what's happening, but it might be. But we care because Fatu has been saying, I love Solo Sikoa. I love Solo. I'm loyal to him. And suddenly Solo walks out and Fatu doesn't go, where are you going, Solo? Instead, he goes, my mic time. I got things to say. That's interesting. It wouldn't be if they hadn't established the dynamic between those two. Yeah. And again, it just doesn't seem like AEW is thinking, oh, who is Kyle Fletcher? Yeah, how does he feel about this big rise in prominence that he's had the last few months? He's just another guy running around getting beat up and hitting people from behind and then getting beat up. We don't know anything more about him than we did a month ago. He got some promo time, and now he's just a guy. They're going to draw better ratings if they get people to care about the journeys and get to know the layering of these personalities.
Precisely. If you build up these storylines where you build that trust with the audience, build that trust with the fans by having these multi-layered storylines where these little things, these nuances matter. Like you think about these different TV shows of, did you notice this thing happen in this show. Notice this thing. It keeps people much more engaged, and it rewards the audience for noticing these things and paying attention to it. Whereas AEW, over time, we've seen how things just kind of drop off if it's not working, or, you know, people's reactions. It doesn't really mean a whole lot. We just talked about how at the beginning, you know, when we start talking about the Don Callis family of Brian Cage and Lance Archer, when they were introduced, it seemed like, wow, they're really going to go with them this time. They're really going to go with this tag team. Maybe they could win the tag team championship, and then just nothing. You know, and that is unfortunately where a lot of this stuff goes, except for the people that they've really established. And as we said, a lot of those established people establish themselves in other companies and not in AEW.
Yep. Okay. We talked about the arena a little bit. We've got a couple emails we'll get to that'll hit on some other storyline issues, but I wanted to circle back just to the setting of tonight's show and the schedule that they released, and that they're running some more smaller buildings. We had some chat room comments on that. 27 Newsmen said the size of the arena really matched the brand this week. Ugly or not, it was a right size to make them look good. Rizilla said they go to smaller arenas for better looking crowds and then serve them the same garbage that drove off half of your original fan base. So I guess, you know, well, we brought up Roy Wilkins, and Chris J did too. Roy Wilkins Auditorium in St. Paul, Minnesota. It's great for an ECW pay-per-view in 2000 when I sat second row. It could look rough 25 years later in HD, but they can't run the XL Energy Center, which is attached to Roy Wilkins at the Convention Center complex in downtown St. Paul, where the Minnesota Wild play, and it's a beautiful arena even 25 years later, or Target Center, which is in Minneapolis where the Timberwolves play. Yeah, they can't. I mean, they could have run there, but they're going to have to darken almost all the arena. But then Fan Blast, really interesting comment. I watched with a friend who was a casual fan, and he hadn't watched in a few years, and he asked, what happened to AEW? Why do they look like that? Zach Barber, of course. Strawman was the word I was looking for, not false premise. Strawman, Zach, the king of strawman arguments, presents an argument we're not making and wants us to defend it. But he writes, AEW can't win. They use smaller buildings, and they still get griped at about the venue. No, I didn't gripe about the venue. I griped about how they filmed the venue. I said that they needed to be more creative with it. And I also raised an alarm that I think is a fact, not an opinion, that some people are going to look at that building and think AEW is not Major League. I thought last week, I'll defend last week. Joel, what do you think of the building last week compared to what we saw this week? Differences?
Yeah, I mean, last week's building was just a very unique structure of how they did those upper levels, where it just seemed, I mean, it was unique where they had kind of these different bars there versus your typical sections, where this, you know, I mean, they're going to run into the same issue of the Roy Wilkins, where they don't have like sections that go all the way to the floor. They're going to have floor seating, and then they have an upper deck there. And so the way that you should probably shoot that is just by shooting the stage, you know, is probably shooting the stage there. And then you can still get some good, you know, wide shots of the crowd. I think they're going to be able to fill a lot in the Roy Wilkins. I don't think it's going to be a sellout right away, but I think once that show comes around, it's actually going to be pretty packed in there.
I don't know if they've ever done it Roy Wilkins, but most of the time you don't need to. I've seen, like, I saw David Bowie at Roy Wilkins. I've got great memories of Roy Wilkins Auditorium.
I love that building. I think it's really cool that it's still there, and they're still having stuff, you know, in that. And we saw NXT there. You know, they've had house shows there before. Yeah. So it has been run recently. What I would do, if it's feasible, again, I'm not an expert in this, is I'd get some portable bleachers if I'm AEW for these buildings. From wherever you get portable bleachers, I don't know. They're probably online somewhere. They should look for the same place that they should be looking for acoustic panels for their backstage echoey promos, so that there's some sound dampening for all the echoes. I mean, you can buy it on Amazon, spend $300 and have some portable sound panels that'll make their interviews backstage in these cavernous brick background settings sound way better. It's inexcusable. But back to the point, have some bleachers that start at the height roughly of where that wall is, and they taper down, and maybe only have 2 rows of fans on the floor because the bleacher fills that wall. So you can just have fans sit on a portable bleacher, and they're packed, and you got a hard cam looking at that. It's way better than looking at a wall. I mean, I don't know that aiming at the entrance stage is the ideal answer as you propose, because now you're looking at a video wall as opposed to fans. But I think there's like a third option between a wall and the ROH pay-per-view pattern of just aiming at the entrance stage.
I think there's got to be a way to shoot it differently where you don't have that look. And I would just, if this is where AEW is going to go, if this is going to be their, I think they need to scout buildings. Like, this sounds so crass, but like fire 6 people who are just hangers on, like wrestlers who just are not contributing, and spend that money on scouting these buildings and figuring out how to shoot them better and creatively. I think it makes a difference. And if it's about budget, we don't have money to send someone to an arena and scout it. There's some wrestlers who aren't wrestling. Just have them do it. Have them become experts.
Send around Colt Cabana to go around the country to go find all these different venues.
I'm not naming names, but Matt Taven, maybe he has a knack for it. I don't know. I just named a name. Let's see. Corey Dallas Standing says, I like these small, medium venues they're using. I agree about the hard cam shooting an empty wall for sure, though. And yeah, I mean, that's the challenge is just, I mean, they've booked themselves into a corner a bit by not being able to run big buildings, but now they're drawing 2,000-3,000 fans. And I say this when they launched Collision, I was like, we're a year or two away from them not drawing well, because they're going to water down they're going to go to markets twice as often. They're going to water down their booking. No one knows who you're going to see when you go to a show, because half the stars are on Dynamite, or 2/3 are on Dynamite, 1/3 are on Collision. You never know who you're getting. By the way, I during the show I was texting, and Samoa Joe had travel issues. I talked to someone in AEW, and he had travel issues, so he just wasn't able to make it to the building. So that's why the Nick Wayne Joe match didn't happen. AEW, tell people in the building and apologize. You advertise a match. If you think a match is worth advertising, then you probably think people are buying tickets to see it. And unless our on-site correspondent Ian missed it, as a courtesy, tell him, hey, Joe had travel issues. We regret not being able to give you the match. Instead, Swerve Strickland's going to wrestle. Just like talk to your audience. Same thing with the TV audience. If it's worth advertising a match on social media, which they did for Joe and Nick, it's also worth acknowledging it's not going to happen. If you think it's not important enough to acknowledge, then you shouldn't be promoting it. Once you promote it, people are tuning in theory to see it. Step up. Just go, yeah, we had this scheduled. It's just a quick little comment. I don't think I missed it, and that would be nice if they did. All right. So, like I said, we got some emails. So let's jump to that, Joel.
Okay.
We'll go to Shay in Brooklyn. Let me move this over so I'm not torquing my neck too much. Shay from Brooklyn says, really fun episode tonight despite the Death Rider stuff. We haven't talked a lot about the Death Riders yet, and there's a lot of chat room consternation about them. This Mox run has hands down been my least favorite title run in AEW so far. Honestly, feels like he's hurting the show more than helping these days.
Yeah.
Okay, so Joel, the Moxie storyline started with a lot of, whoa, this is going to be the big story arc in AEW. Maybe Shane McMahon's going to be part of it. I reported accurately he wasn't going to be. People kept speculating for weeks it was, not believing my report. I have one hell of a track record, by the way, in recent years. When I say something, if a talent's not going to work, that there's baggage, and just watch, it's not going to work out. I'm like batting pretty close to 1,000 on this. When I say something's not going to happen, I don't say it lightly. It doesn't happen. I say something is going to happen. If I don't, but to the Britt Baker story, there's things people say I said that I didn't say. And if you listen to the 2-minute report, it's pretty clear there's a lot of nonsense going out there. So the Moxley thing is one of those storylines that had a lot of, it's sort of like the Tony Khan neck brace thing. Oh, this is going to be great. And then like 2-3 weeks later, they just lose their way. We're going to do wrestling rankings 2 weeks later. That doesn't make any, we can't do that. And then we have to book finishes to matches that make sense for title contention. We don't want to have to do that. That's a headache. Moxley, if you just turn off the volume or you don't listen, you don't know the words he's saying, he's main event. You know what I mean? Like main event. I don't want to see plastic bags. I don't want to see scissors. I don't want to see screwdrivers. It makes no sense that Tony Khan would allow that and just keep paying wrestlers. So there's a certain break in just like a rules of engagement logic that that's hard for me to get past. But I'm not as down on it as Shay and some people in the chat either, even though I think it lost its way and it was too big at the beginning to really work. And the
stakes were way too high at the beginning of it, where there was nowhere else you could really go from there. And that's the problem when you start that big with that big of an angle. Yeah.
So talk about it. What'd you see tonight with it? And do you think there's some criticism that's going too far? Or do you understand where the criticism is coming from as far as what we saw tonight with them?
Oh, I understand where the criticism's coming from. I mean, people are saying that Moxley's promo was nonsensical, the backstage, and I actually watched it on my phone a second time just to make sure I understood what he said about Adam Copeland, talking about Darby Allin. He's also talking about how that Copeland's gonna wake up in the hospital, and it is kind of a lot of repetitive stuff in there where what is this full takeover that they're doing at the end of it, when they're beating down Copeland, you have Jay White and they say, oh, he doesn't have very many friends, doesn't have many allies now that they beat up the Rock and Roll Express and FTR. And I'm like thinking, man, wasn't that long ago when we saw all these mid to lower card guys standing outside the arena to defend AEW's honor? Certainly those people have to be backstage and they want to help cope in this type of situation. And so, yeah, I mean, it's when you go into this big thing where they're trying to do this NWO type level of takeover with plastic bags and these extreme stuff with them, that it's just very hard that there's nowhere else you can go with that stuff. Yep. And so that's why wrestling is, WWE has found a successful formula with the bloodline, because it is about ego, it's about power, it's about world championships. And so it's just telling these layered storylines that kind of have these twists and turns to it, trying to get to an ultimate destination, which is a wrestling match against somebody, and for a championship, which are the stakes. And so it's so it's difficult when you start out that big with the Tony, taking out Tony Khan. Where do you go from there? Well, Tony shows up in a car, and drops off somebody. I can't remember who it was. That there's just, you can't go anywhere from there.
Yeah. There's you get the sense they get excited about something, about 2 to 3 week plan.
Yeah,
I figure they'll make it work from there. And then when something does, it's just AEW is just one constant person with New Year's resolutions January 1st. Like, it's just, this is going to be what I do all year, and you do it for 3 weeks, give or take, and then you don't.
Will Mox talks about this new style of that people celebrating for no reason, the humor and stuff, and I remember comments on here of people defending that, saying, well, actually we did see a lot less humor, we did see a lot less stuff on these other shows, and here we are with Harley Cameron, who's been pointed out that she hasn't won any matches, just doing a total comedy bit with Mercedes, and yeah, she's entertaining, but where is it going? What's it going to drive? I don't know.
Yeah, the idea that your top heel is framing something that the booker, promoter, and other wrestlers think is worthy of TV time, and he is framing it as just an abomination that wrestling fans should reject, isn't healthy any more than MJF saying on national television, Jeff Jarrett, every company you're featured on is a dying company. Like, everyone's thinking, is MJF saying AEW's a dying company? Because Jeff Jarrett's on this company, right? Like, there's things that are just counterproductive to say that are hard. It's just hard to move on from it. And Moxley, if Moxley was a babyface and there was a real shift, that's one thing. If there were a bunch of heels who were goofing off, that's one thing. But like, people were into, I think it was counterproductive for AEW. People were into chanting "Scissor Me Daddy." But I can imagine Moxley looking at that going, I don't want to be in a show with this crap. So I don't know. Billy Gunn, Chris Jericho, Adam Copeland, Jeff Jarrett. I mean, there's a lot of TV time going. I mean, Billy Gunn, he was on Collision a little bit. I mean, his time is dying down, but Jarrett, I mean, there's a lot of older wrestlers getting a lot of, TV time as active wrestlers right now. Mm-hmm. At least with Jericho, it's imperfect, and somebody can certainly, I get there can be a counter argument, but Jericho does seem to latch on to young, new acts. Santana and Ortiz weren't new and young, but they were new to the national scene. But Sammy Guevara got over and then sort of self-destructed through immaturity and a lack of leadership in AEW. And then you had Matt Menard and Angela Parker, and they got a boost, I would argue, from where they were prior to AEW.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's been lost a little bit because there wasn't really a formal breakup of their alliance with Jericho in a way that made a lot of sense. And then the whole Danny Garcia dancing thing with Menard doing commentary just felt What am I rooting for him to dance or not? Are you rooting for him to dance or not? And why or why not? Just never really landed. But Brian Keith is, they've got him in a bit that it's comedic, but it's not like, I don't think it takes the tone of the show down. I think there's a place for just a sidekick lackey, just echoing what his boss or mentor says. And then Big Bill, I think, has a chance to get over. By the way, I'd be giving TV time to Big Bill over Jeff Jarrett right now. Big Bill's an awful name, but he's. But anyway, when people say who would you rather be pushing instead of Jarrett, it's like a lot of people I'd rather. I don't know if they're all going to work out, but I know exactly what we're getting with Jarrett. And when you're an NBA team winning, 4 out of 10 games. Yeah, there might be a veteran who's getting a lot of time, who what you're going to get, and that's at best a 500 season, and you might or might not make the playoffs and lose in the first round. Sometimes you take a chance on a young wrestler, a young player, because there is potential. You might be worse or you might be better, but at least you don't know you're going to be mediocre. And AEW is doing a lot of things where you're going to be mediocre. Adam Cole hanging out with Kyle O'Reilly and Roderick Strong, mediocrity. Jeff Jarrett, Billy Gunn. I mean, you're good. It's even Copeland at this point, sadly, in the way he's being featured, because there's too many old guys. Just you're not gonna. It's not gonna be a difference maker, and they need to find difference makers. And Acclaimed could have been at one point, and then they just got subservient to Billy Gunn. He stole all their heat. They didn't know what was happening or didn't care because they're making merch money. And now look at them. I mean, they break up, and it's not even a story on Dynamite. I mean, it's not even touched on. This legacy team in Dynamite officially break up on Collision. Doesn't get TV time on Dynamite.
Yeah, they were getting huge reactions just a couple of years ago. I mean, these guys were so over. It was a big deal when they finally won the tag team championships. And, now people, for myself included, for the past year have just been clamoring for this team to just go away because it just, Max Caster is just not been working. There's more, I see more upside in Anthony Bowens, but certainly with the trajectory of AEW and just, who's going to be able to get time and get over. I mean, I'm not optimistic about, what they're going to be able to do with him. I don't think Billy Gunn should be on TV at all. That I think that you need to make a concerted effort on who you're going to designate and really find unique ways to make them interesting and build up their characters to where people can understand what their motivations are and start latching onto a journey. Yep.
Okay, let's go back to Shay's email. Ever since going to smaller arenas, the crowds have brought good energy back to the shows, tonight included. Also, it's just nice to see arenas that look a little different. That's the thing. Yeah. I mean, I advocated for mid-sized buildings, and I stand by it. Mm-hmm. There's pros and cons. I mean, there's no question. And if you disagree, Todd Martin made the case on The Fix a couple weeks ago. He'd rather they stay in big arenas. They were doing a good job filming them, and I gave AEW credit. They did a great job darkening the arena, picking the right camera angles, not drawing attention to the empty seats, and making the best of it. Where the average viewer isn't overtly thinking about it. Obviously, WWE showing shots from the upper deck, sell out to the last row, well-lit arenas. That gives off a feeling of this is a red-hot Major League product. AEW can't do that. But they can have an absence of drawing attention to how small their crowds are, and they were good at the absence of drawing attention to it. In the end, it still has a minor league vibe, but at least you're not actively thinking about all the empty seats because they did a good job filming it. Mm-hmm. And when you're in a major building, and again, AEW didn't take advantage of this, and I harped on it for years, and now Lee Fitting is doing it and doing exactly what I spent years, Joel, we talked about it, what they should have been doing. When you go to a major building in a major downtown area, show the outside of the building, show fans arriving, excited, wearing merchandise, have whoever, Alex Marvez or Renee out there going, who are you here to see? Why are you here? Like, show that energy. Give us a vicarious experience as viewers, show people in the concourse. WWE's doing that almost every week in creative ways with CM Punk and Jey Uso and shots of the concourse and people lining up for things. At Netflix, they showed the red carpet stuff on the Netflix premiere. AEW had a chance to do that when they're in major buildings. Even when the crowds weren't sold out, they could have given a major league vibe by showing the downtown skyline, the exterior of the building, the excitement. We all feel it, Joel. When we go to a wrestling show or any sporting event, people filing in the building to go to the show. It's sort of like, it's weird that unboxings on YouTube are a thing, but we all like when we get something cool and we unbox it, it's kind of a fun time. So we get a vicarious thrill out of watching someone else unbox something, and we learn about the product too. Tony Khan just doesn't have a vision for that. And it's too bad because they're not going to those major cities as often with the major buildings anymore, but that could have given them a major league vibe even when crowds were smaller. it's tough to go to Knoxville outside that arena and show the exterior of it and sell it as a positive. But WWE showed how to do it on SmackDown last Friday, because they went to an old building in San Diego that predated the Met Sports Center, Joel, by a year. And it's just like the Met Sports Center. No luxury suites, one concourse serving both the upper and lower deck, very similar to Met Center in size and architecture. And they walked through it, and they talked about through the corridors, and they talked about all the big names, Elvis and Jimi Hendrix, and there's history in this building. And they took something that could have been a negative, because it's not Intuit Center, and they turned it into a positive by embracing where they were. And AEW's not even doing that. Like, hey, they did a little bit with this Knoxville history, but they could have done more and said, this isn't going to be the slickest looking building, but let's celebrate its history more, and let's own it. So there's just so many things AEW could be doing, no matter which direction they choose with arenas. The big ones that are almost empty, or the smaller, medium-sized ones that are good. But you know what? I mean, there's been lost opportunities. Zach goes, you give props to a scumbag who got fired for deeply inappropriate behavior at ESPN. Zach, you know how I feel about that. Every time Lee Fitting's name is said, people are thinking about that, I think, very credible, thorough article in The Athletic. But I deal in facts. And the fact is Lee Fitting came in and did a lot of the things that I spent 4 or 5 years saying AEW should be doing. Just a fact. I mean, it was a good decision. Lee Fitting's behavior off camera doesn't change the fact that he made good production decisions when he arrived and changed the look of WWE from what Kevin Dunn did for years. I'm not going to not report facts. I did not say Lee Fitting deserves a promotion. I'm stating a fact. He came in and he did this. Facts are facts, and that's true.
Yeah.
So, and Zach, Wade, we get it. WWE's the end all be all. No, they're not. And if you listen to my SmackDown and Raw post show, Zach, you know that. I don't think that. But there are things that you're not helping, Zach, by being blind to the things that AEW could have done that they didn't, that helped put them in this position.
But AEW just has really raised the game, or WWE has raised the game and changed everything in the way now that we've seen wrestling presented on a major league level, to where it is going to be so difficult to compete with that. Whereas, New Japan, TNA, AEW, they were all, with WWE, all kind of a similar kind of camera angles, presentation, the way that they've done it. And now WWE has made that really at the center of their brand, I would say, in a lot of ways, the production of what they did when they moved to Netflix. And I mean, that needs to be that is now part of the equation, along with the booking and the stars and all these other things that make wrestling a success. It's not a sports team where if you just get wins in an established league that you start building popularity. That wrestling is so multi-layered to that, to where now the production and we've all been talking about that for the past 6 years with AEW, that the production has always been an issue. And I mean, that's where, Tony Khan, I know he wants to be in control. He wants to have the credit for a lot of the things, which I think we just know, being involved in businesses, that you just can't do everything. And being an effective leader is not doing everything. It is being able to find the right people and put the right people in the right seats and be able to designate and effectively convey your vision of what you're looking for, holding those people accountable, to doing it the right way. But you have to find the right people. It is not possible, and it's actually not good leadership to get no sleep and come in and want to dictate everything. That's where you see these lapses in different areas. And so where Tony Khan could be effective and get a lot of praise is by finding these people, like not Lee Fitting, but somebody who has a different vision, somebody who can elevate AEW, because certainly the money, the backing is there to do that, to bring somebody in and really change that look of the show. It's not just try a couple different camera angles like they've done, in different weeks. They've tried different camera angles, and it's kind of jarring at first of what they're doing with that. But there are different ways. You think of all the different movies and cinematographers and ways you're able to shoot things and give different feelings to stuff. Those people exist out there. It's not just one way of your hard camera and a couple handhelds.
And there's so many wrestlers who you look at them and they're like, they're on this roster still, and they're and they get as Jeff Hardy said, we got paid per date. We only get so many dates. It's not like Tony's paying $500,000 to these people who are just on a per date deal making minimum money. But there's a lot of money being spent in some ways, and to me, it's just like Tony Khan has, the money is coming in now, and it's time to improve the quality of the product. the sound quality, the sound mixing. And yes, Joe, put a headhunter out there to find somebody who is getting acclaim for the production work they're doing at a regional sports network, and find out if they like wrestling, or at least have a willingness to come and work for a company for a raise. And I mean, yeah, that's part of the job.
I do a podcast with one. So
yeah, yes,
there's a
yes, yep, Greg. And I'll add this. I don't sound like I'm like giving advice, but I am. Like Tony Khan, and other people in AEW have told me this. Their number one wish for Tony Khan is to disconnect from social media for a month. He'd get so much done. He'd get so much done if he wasn't refreshing on Twitter and worrying about what this little echo chamber said. He's addicted to it. From what I've heard over the years, it's not serving him well. As I ranted earlier about, there's just so much misinformation and nonsense and insincere players out there stirring things up. It's frankly just a complete immature waste of time to be on social media when you're running a company, when you should be spending that time doing other things. And he might go, well, I only do it when I'm brushing my teeth and waiting for my plane to refuel or something. It's like, no, from what I hear, it's worse than that. So yeah, spend that time. Just get off social media and frankly, watch some WWE, watch some other sports, and get some ideas for things, and sit down and have more conversations with the wrestlers who you believe. Anyway, I'm getting too deep into giving Tony Khan life advice, but when you watch the product, it's genuine. It's not. There's no malice in the recommendations. It's things that I think, and I've talked to a lot of people in AEW the last 5-6 years who inform my opinions, not form them, who would be nodding along, listening to this on an airplane ride home tonight.
Right. Yeah. Turn off the social media, but then also at some point, if you want to be really effective in promoting AEW, you gotta take the plug out of some of the other ventures and stuff that he's been a part of. I just don't know how someone is effectively able to give it their absolute best to all of those different things, where I can commend somebody for trying to do that. Definitely. That's part of what he's been doing, is that he is a hard-working person. Absolutely no doubt about that. But I think that if AEW is the baby and he really wants to improve that, maybe it's time to step away from the Jaguars. Maybe it's time to step away from your stuff with Fulham, and his analytics stuff. That it's time to just unplug from those things and really reevaluate AEW and say, I want to be at a certain point that, or maybe his measure of success was getting this television deal, and he can't understand why other people are criticizing it when his measuring is saying, hey, I've secured money, I'm profitable. I'm not these other things that people have accused me of. But if he wants to really grow this thing and have this thing to get to a competitive level, which I think he does to a point, that I think he really just needs to reevaluate some things and say that if I want to be the most effective leader, I have to identify a clear accountability chart with me at the top of it, but I have to delegate and hold people accountable to doing the right things. But most importantly, he has to, as a leader, the CEO, he has to effectively communicate that vision to those people, and be very clear about where they are now and where they're going, where they want to be.
Yep. And from everything I hear, pro wrestling's Tony Khan's favorite part of all his jobs. It's his favorite job.
Yeah,
and it's
for sure.
But things are sliding. I mean, it's when MJF says it's Jeff Jarrett, you appear on TV for dying companies. That should have felt like, well, not this time. Everyone should have thought, well, that's not the case this time. But nobody thought that. They all thought maybe that is happening with AEW too. I mean, but the TV money, that's just bought them time. It's not inevitable success. And then. Yeah. Anyway, by the way, one example ties a few things together. Corey Dallas Standing said, it took me a while to realize it was Rock and Roll Express on the ground in the backstage beatdown. I couldn't see their faces. I thought they were just some randos. So this gets into, you're in Knoxville, rich wrestling history, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, all kinds of things. They could have opened the show briefly by showing fans arriving at the venue, show the architecture, show downtown, and then say, we've had a blast in Knoxville with such rich wrestling history. I doubt they're going to want to put Smoky Mountain Wrestling over, given Jim Cornette. But you know what? Jim Cornette's a high-profile critic of AEW. Smoky Mountain Wrestling, factually speaking, ran that building and had some things. You can mention that in passing, or not. Just talk about other companies if you really. It's not essential to the point I'm making. But show Ricky and Robert engaging with some fans, signing some autographs, and go legendary tag team, the Rock and Roll Express. We're doing,
and they did sign autographs before the show. They could have filmed a couple things right there.
Yes, and say they've wrestled. So get some facts. Have Excalibur, Tony Schiavone, whoever, talk to Ricky and Robert. Say, what are some of your favorite members in Knoxville or this region or whatever? Relay them, and you've now established they're there. And again, this is not a 3-minute package piece. I don't want some straw man argument. Wade now wants 3 minutes of the Rock and Roll Express at the beginning of Dynamite instead of Kenny Omega. That's utter freaking nonsense. That's not what I'm saying. In 4 seconds, you can show the Rock and Roll Express signing autographs. Excalibur can say the Rock and Roll Express, legendary tag team, wrestled many big matches in this area, help promote this show, and it's great to have this team here. And then show some shots of them mingling with Private Party, giving them advice on their tag match. That fits into promoting a match later in the show. There's ways you can accomplish multiple things at once, but you're establishing they're there. You're showing them. You're telling a new fan who they are. You're showing Private Party chatting with them about their tag match and strategizing. You're showing that fans still care about them because they're lined up for their autograph. Boom. You do all that in 12 seconds. Later on, when they're beat up, it means more. But Tony Khan books the show for people who know on Twitter that they were there. Why do we need to introduce Rock and Roll Express? Because he doesn't differentiate enough, if at all, between people who are scrolling Twitter X constantly and see Rock and Roll Express all showing up on the feed, so everybody knows that the Rock and Roll Express are in Knoxville. As Cody Rhodes himself said, everything about AEW that's canon should be on Dynamite. You shouldn't need shoulder content to figure out what's going on. The Rock and Roll Express should have been established. So then the angle means more because you've told today's audience. You've shown them they're here. So again, it's just I want to give some specifics sometimes instead of generalities. I'm not just criticizing. I'm offering what I think are just an example of a solution or an example of accomplishing multiple things at once. That just feels like a no-brainer to me, that it doesn't seem like it's crossing anybody's mind in AEW, or they've long since given up bringing up these ideas. Mm-hmm. And by the way, when they're down on the mat, when they're down on the ground, don't show Robert Gibson's bald spot. Tell Robert Gibson, face the camera after you're beat down. Like, why are we looking at the top of a bald head with a little ring of hair around it as Excalibur informs us it's Ricky and Robert? There's a way to film that where we actually see who it is, and they didn't even do that.
Yeah.
Again, it's just detail work. All right. Goodfellas says, I had no idea it was Rock and Roll Express until now. So, yeah. All right, back to Shay's email. Omega and Ospreay feel huge, and it was a welcome, energetic way to start. And all the linked story threads between the guys in this really help make Grand Slam's tag match feel important. That match will be amazing. The problem is that last line, the match will be amazing. It's like mission accomplished. It'll be an amazing match. Like you want a sense that Tony Khan and everyone's like, all right, how do we make this mean more? And I, to their credit, that was what this show was about.
Definitely
trying. Yeah.
Yep.
The Hurt Business are probably the coolest guys on the show. They dress like stars. Their presentation is big. They're physically big and imposing. They wrestle big and imposing, and the theme is catchy. It's no wonder they're so over. Private Party didn't have a great run after their great title win, but credit to them for going out there and bumping like madmen. Really sold for Hurt Syndicate's offense the best they could. The tag titles instantly feel more important. They really do. As a sidebar, when Pac came out and the announcer said, "Oh, he's a Trios champ," I'm like, I didn't know that. Like,
do they even carry those belts around with them?
They don't carry the belts around. Mercedes
get rid of
carries
it.
Around.
Get rid of them.
Yeah. So yeah, Hurt Business is a model for what AEW should be aiming to do with more of their talent. And yeah, I mean the pieces are there, and it's like almost instantly fixable. I mean, there's like 6 things they could just start doing starting next week that would make such a difference: production, pushes. Going younger, taking chances, giving minutes to the younger players who have a big upside, a big downside. You don't know what you're getting, but it's a lot more exciting when you don't know what's going to happen, when you have a team that's on the rise, than watching Ryan Gomes.
Oh, jeez.
You know he's going to be a star, get 36 minutes a game on a team that wins 29 games. That's not fun to watch. So that's a Timberwolves reference. You can look. And
oh man, but yet yes, you do have to designate the right people. At this point, you have Daniel Garcia, who is the TNT champion. I am sorry, I don't care that there has been so much damage done to that character. Some of it's the booking, some of it has been
so start-stop.
it's so start-stop with him that you have to designate the right people and really go and really, like say that they're here. I want to go here with them and tactfully book them in a certain way. You can't just present matches. We're so beyond that with trying to capture people's attention that there has to be so much more of a hook to it than just some catchy catchphrases for them and having some good matches. That there has to be so much more layers to get people invested and really grab their attention on more than just a one-time viewing.
Yep. Sadler Vision 3, by the way, said, I haven't heard Ryan Gomes' name in a decade, LOL. Most people haven't heard his name ever, but he was a journeyman, small forward in the NBA, played on the Wolves for a few years, and every time I heard his name, I thought, I'm not interested in the Wolves because I know exactly what he's going to be, and he's not Tony Campbell. Like, he's not even Tony Campbell. Anyway, I'm really going back to not.
Well, I could totally visualize him right now. Number 8, he was there during that one year when they had that weird kind of hybrid jersey where they still had a little bit of the trees and it said Wolves, and then they kind of cleaned it up for the next year, and then it was just kind of more sterile.
But my point is, he was a journeyman player who could start in the NBA and play respectably, but he was not. You don't want him to be one of your 5 starters. And you don't have a high upside, but you also know you're not going to be the worst team in the league if he's, playing respectable basketball. But there's nothing exciting about watching a team is going to miss the playoffs, but win 29 to 33 games. Like, that's the worst case scenario. And we got Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns by being awful the year before in getting number 1 overall picks. AEW needs to take a chance on some young people who Tony should look at and go, there's something here. And it has nothing to do with what they did in WWE or ROH. It's a vision looking at someone and saying, I can make money with this guy by using my TV time on my platform and veterans around him to get him over. But it's going to be a week to week effort to get them to become stars. And it can happen. WWE, sorry, Zach, finds a way to do that with a lot of people. Braun Breaker, for example, was nothing. Nobody knew who he was 2 years ago. And now look at him.
And finding the right veterans to guide them and mentor them along and be that that editor on a lot of that stuff, because I've seen AEW just give a lot of giving them a lot of latitude to the people that they've bought goodwill with, MJF being the particular name who comes to mind, where then they start doing these other ideas and stuff that are probably not in their best interest or in the best interest of the company. And so to have more editing of that stuff, where yes, you want to allow wrestlers to be themselves. That was kind of the big deal with AEW, is that it's not fully all scripted of that stuff, but you certainly need some more trusted people. Like we talk about these segments of having the Rock and Roll Express, their face, facing more of the camera so we can see them. Yep. Don't they have agents? Don't they have people who are going over these segments, giving them notes on this stuff? Like, why does this keep happening from segment to segment of some of these weird, things of just like, come on, couldn't you have, to most viewers, they're seeing, if you just would have tweaked it a little bit like this, don't they have somebody who can give kind of that quote unquote magic touch to kind of do that little tweak to enhance that?
I think there's some people who wanted to be that and they just lost, their spirit was broken when it went unheard. I mean, there's stories of people go to Tony Khan with a lot of things you're saying and they start talking and then Tony interrupts and 8 minutes later, he has still not stopped talking. And then he says, I've got a phone call I have to take. Like, people love, people genuinely.
Yeah, he's very scarce with his time,
But the larger point is people like Tony Khan, but they can't get a word in edgewise when they'll spend all week thinking about how to approach Tony. They'll start talking to him. He'll interrupt, filibuster, and then go, I got to go. Like, in-person phone calls. Like, that's an experience I've heard about with people. So eventually when you go, Tony's not interested in what I have to say. He's not going to listen to what I have to say. He's got his own mindset, and he's going to tell me what that mindset is, filibuster, and then tell me, okay, nice talking with you, when really what he did is talk at you. That's a leadership problem. That's not listening. Pretty soon people go, okay, as long as my paycheck clears, I'm going to show up and just sit in a corner and not draw attention to myself. And unfortunately, I mean, I'm thinking literally right now, 3 people that applies to, and people telling me it applies to even more than that. So Yeah.
Yep, that is absolutely a description of a leadership problem of, when you use your time scarcely like that, that takes a lot of the spirit out of your employees, where you have to give them time to feel heard and run with some people's ideas. Allow them to do that stuff, allow them to fail on those things, and be able to give them feedback. I mean, he's producing all these shows, he's watching all this stuff, but again, he's spread so thin between multiple things that he doesn't have time to do that.
I can't resist doing this, but we'll move on quickly from it. Sadler version 3 said that Kevin Love era Wolves team was horrendous. When Ricky Rubio, was it against the Lakers when he tore his knee ligament like 3/4 of the way into the season, and the Wolves were like one of the best teams in the NBA at that point. Like they were a playoff team. And who was our center? Bald guy.
Nikola Pekovic, yes, who is now a mobster in Montenegro. That's what I hear.
Yeah, no, great fact. Or great allegation. I want to say it's a fact. It's rumor has it. Whatever. But that Ricky Rubio, Kevin Love, Al Jefferson, Pekovic, that was a team that had real potential with Rick Adelman coaching him, a great coach. And then Ricky's injury, it took the spirit out of everybody and everything. And Ricky was never quite the same. But that team was special. And when people make fun of who's the GM, who's everyone make
David Kahn,
like everyone's like, oh, he was horrible. And I get people who know well, they speak authoritatively about what a joke he was. That team had a chance that he assembled with Love and Ricky Rubio and Peck. That team had a chance to be really good. And it was that Ricky Rubio injury that took away his chance to go, whether you think it's luck or despite me, I was the GM or president of basketball operations during the most successful season the Wolves had since Kevin Garnett. And if it weren't for that Ricky injury, he would have had that bragging right.
That's true. And they hired him, Glenn Taylor hired him on a recommendation from David Stern. And apparently he hired David Stern was confusing David Kahn with somebody else in the Pacers organization. And so they hired this guy who had no qualifications. This John Krasinski, the main beat writer, has confirmed the story that they hired David Stern was confusing him with somebody else in the organization, and he had no qualifications to run a basketball team.
Just it's astounding that can happen, but it shows that you can be a billionaire owner and be completely incompetent. That's the moral of the story.
Yep. I worked with somebody who worked for Glenn Taylor, and there's nothing, I don't want to totally rag on him, but there is nothing special about Glenn. He is just a regular everyday guy who just, made some good business decisions.
Yeah, I made him high five me once at a game. I had a really good seat, and he was sitting. I'm not bragging. He was sitting behind me, and I was.
He was sitting behind you.
Yeah, he was sitting behind me at this game. This was very early in his run.
Wow.
Yeah. Back then you could splurge and get a really good seat, and it didn't. Yeah. It wasn't like your life savings. And I only did. I sat front row, second row like twice during the KG era. And this was one of those times, and for whatever reason he was sitting behind me, and so I was like going nuts at games. I embarrass people at sporting events. Like tell Kelly Wells, I'm like he's just sitting there going, wait, calm down. And so I was super excited. Something I turned around and he wasn't doing anything, and I was like, you're the owner. And I said this to a Billy. I just looked at him like, stand up. Cheer, come on, give me a high five. And he's like sitting there like Niles Crane, like, oh my God, what's going on here? Someone's talking to me. Then I got him to high five me. So he has Niles Crane's like demeanor for people who don't know him.
Well, I'm very hopeful that they hopefully conclude the ownership dispute, and I am very much in the camp of wanting this to go to Rodriguez and Laurie, knowing that Laurie has expanded his wealth and that I don't think that money will be an issue on that front. And Alex Rodriguez being a competitor, I think that has a huge impact on the team versus the exact example you gave of Glenn Taylor of like, we play for this guy. This guy signs our checks.
Yeah. All right. Back to Shay's email. We'll wrap up here in a minute. More Harley Cameron, please. She takes advantage of any screen time she gets. What'd you think of her serenade song? Too haha or worth doing because you can play the guitar, and like this is literally something I talk about. Just because you can play a banjo, if Steve Austin could play the banjo or Triple H could play the banjo, doesn't mean it should be part of your gimmick on TV. So just because you can juggle doesn't mean you're, like John Moxley shouldn't juggle even if he can. Like, well, maybe that might actually be, he could make that work. But So my point is just because she can, should she? Or does this work?
I mean, she's funny, she's entertaining. They found a lane for her, but no, I don't think it's productive whatsoever. I mean, there'll be people who like her and they're going to tell their story of how she hasn't gotten a win and try and build that up. But I just it's not for me. Yeah.
All right. Swerve and Ricochet's feud continues to be some of Ricochet's best work. He's always been phenomenal in ring, but this may be the first time that he feels like a true character. It's been up and down with Ricochet and AEW. What do you think of what he did this week?
I mean, I'm not a fan of the scissor stuff of putting that up to Prince Nana's neck. I think that definitely turning him heel is the right move here, because I was in the crowd at Full Gear where he was just real. I mean, it was not going in the right direction as far as trying to push him as a babyface, because the comparisons to Ospreay of trying to say these guys are the same. I mean, they're just not the same at this point in time. Ricochet was so damaged that you had to try and reframe him the best way you can. So I can applaud him for, I think he's doing a good job of trying to really reframe his character into something that he hasn't done before. And I think for the most part, it's been effective, but I would just do without the scissors part of it.
There are things that you just can't follow up on. Like, and I thought of commenting on it. I'm like, well, but there's so many other things that happen that we accept, that the boss accepts. But putting a scissors up to the neck of someone and saying, I'm going to gut you like a fish. Like, if you do that because you think it should have an impact, like it should, oh man, poor Prince Nana. And actually, I credit to Prince Nana. He wasn't jovial and jubilant. He was like, he was in a state of shock later in the show. Just staring off into space, like his life flashed before him. And I credit to him for selling it. Yeah. Nobody else did. Like, if someone holds waves the scissors around and then holds it up to the neck of a non-wrestler, that should be the top story in the show. And you shouldn't just go back to Tony and Taz and Excalibur promoting Matt. That should be a big deal. He threatened to basically cut the carotid artery of a human being live on television. And you want to get something from it when you do it, but you don't want to own it. Because if you own it, Ricochet should be suspended. Like there should be an authority figure who suspends him for doing that. Should not be acceptable. Nor should flashing a plastic bag around after what happened to Danielson, like Moxley did last week or the week before. Just be an edict. Nick Aldis, sorry, Zach, but Nick Aldis just said, Kevin Owens, if you don't return the belt, you're suspended. And then Cody says, don't suspend him. I want him in the ring. And Nick's like, you make a compelling case, okay. But the babyface talked the authority figure into not doing the obvious thing, which is stolen property, return it or you're fired, or return it or you're suspended. Scissors up against the neck of somebody should lead to a suspension or a threat of one that the babyface says, please don't, I want to get him in the ring. Just been around forever. It's promoting trope, but it makes a lot more logical sense than letting people threaten the life of people. And it just is acted like nothing. So this is what I considered in my head when I thought of bringing this up. So Zach Barber says only use steel chairs and candlesticks as weapons. Yeah. I mean, it's well established in wrestling. You hit someone in the back with a chair, it hurts. It's illegal except in no rules matches. It hurts. It gets sold, and it's sort of part of the rules of engagement. Same thing with candlesticks. Mm-hmm. I don't think knives, scissors, guns, plastic bags.
Are you okay with barbed wire for hardcore matches?
Yeah, of course, in a hardcore match. But I don't think Ricochet should be able to put a barbed wire around Prince Nana's neck and hold him back and go, I'm about to slice his artery. Like, the things should matter. Things should have a certain weight to them based on the context, who's doing it to whom. If it's a no rules match and anything goes, that's totally different. It's sanctioned. But when you're threatening someone with a deadly weapon, it's ridiculous. They want to eat their cake and have their cake too. They want to go, we want people to be shocked by this, but we can't lean into it too much because it would make no sense not to suspend him. So we won't even talk about it after it happens. We'll just move on and call the next match. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Back to Shay. Not enough is made of how much Swerve has transformed his appearance. He looks like a main event guy now. Just a few years ago, he was a cruiserweight. This guy has bulked up so much that seeing his quick, fluid movements come across even more impressive these days. I miss him as champ. Hangman Page continues to have the best journeys in AEW. Tonight was the first time since he's gone mad that he actually looked like he had some remorse and even a regret. Hopefully, we're finally on the road to Hangman getting his heart back. The tease of an MJF program in the future makes me wish they'd wrap up the Jarrett stuff with MJF soon so we can get to MJF Page quicker. I always said there's no way that Hangman and Swerve can be in the same building together after what they did to each other, especially the burning the house down. But if Hangman, if the Daniels storyline was let's get a main event out of it, but let's also write Daniels off TV, but it's going to be a key moment for the Hangman character. This wrestler he has a history with says what he said tonight, and I flagged it earlier as a good example of characters moving forward and being on a journey. Then it was worth doing, and if I think Hangman at some point has to come down from where he's been and be more grounded, and this felt like a human reaction to what was said. And if Hangman sort of has a moment where he's just like, he goes, I'm not going to do it on camera. It's too important to do on camera. I don't want to turn the show, but I'm going to have a talk with Swerve. I got to apologize. I don't know where my head was at. Like something that fits where now we understand how they can coexist in the same building. And we understand Hangman is not that person that he was. And they tell a good story about that. I'm good with that.
Yeah, I want to see them continue to have a good story with him because he has been so effective as this character, believable in this journey that he's gone on, that I don't want to see him just go back to where he has been before, but evolve into something else that is a lot more grounded. Like Zach is saying here, of seeing the consequences of his actions, that he has gone so far into this, and he's continues to get over as a character, and I think that he still is a part of the plan of one of their big baby faces, hopefully even like later this year. But you got to find a good story to tell that and not just make that switch, quickly. Yep.
All right. JB from Detroit says, I wish they would have kept the natural friction between Kenny and Will longer than 3 episodes. It makes sense that Kenny wouldn't immediately forgive Will, even though they know they have a common enemy in Callis family. It's similar to how everyone in WWE was or is hesitant to forgive and work with Roman and the OG bloodline. And by the way, I don't think they did enough to establish in the canon of AEW the Ospreay Omega history either, Joel. I think a lot of people know about it. They've done their own research. They lived through it in real time. But if Ospreay's going, you don't even remember the last time or Kenny goes, you said you don't remember the last time we wrestled. Well, I do. That's a long time ago. And I just think they ought to be telling that backstory better so it has more resonance when it's going to be the centerpiece drama among your top 2 baby faces right now. So that'd be a critique. I just think they should do more to explain show what that history is and let us live it a little more. 6 years in, where AEW is still pulling from things that didn't happen in AEW for a lot of the kind of core foundation. And then there's scattered moments where it's been that pre-AEW history has been acknowledged and built on. But AEW acts like it's all canon for Dynamite viewers, and it's not. And that's why, one of the reasons why there's so few Dynamite viewers compared to 2, 3, 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you could draw upon a lot of the history of the New Japan stuff, of kind of the top foreigner in the company. They wrestle each other at the Tokyo Dome show. I want to say that was 2023, and then at that Forbidden Door show later in the year. And so, I mean, I just think that uniting these 2 guys, I mean, is such a major story of having Kenny Omega come back here, is that you can use multiple segments on both shows, Dynamite and Collision, to help tell this story a bit better as to, what that's going on, of how they're finally getting together. Like I said, they were effectively getting to the point that they wanted to add another match to announce something for Australia. And I think it's fine, but it wasn't perfect.
And there's history with Ospreay and Omega, but it was when Ospreay was a special guest. And then Omega's gone for a year, and Ospreay comes in and takes over, and he acknowledged that. There's a lot going on. I also didn't understand Ospreay going, you came at the worst possible time, and then 20 seconds later he goes, I couldn't do this alone. I'm so glad you're here. I can't do this alone. Implying I'm glad you're here. I didn't quite get that. There was a little bit of a weird leap from you came at the worst possible time, and then he made a case why it was the best possible time. So that
was strange. Yeah.
It's just, I don't know how that happens. I mean, if you're Ospreay, you should have a mindset that makes sense and then be able to articulate it without a script. But the things that happen in AEW were built on at the time they happened in AEW. This is a dream match. Let us tell you why, because you haven't seen it on Dynamite. Zach can say Forbidden Door is an AEW show. Well, it was a originally a dream match show with matches that for you to care about them, you had to be a New Japan fan prior to AEW's existence for the most part, or still following New Japan. So the point that Kenny and Omega have this history, yeah, they've dabbled in it, Joel, with matches, but they haven't both been full-time wrestlers on weekly TV until the last few weeks.
Correct.
So you're still pulling from a personal history that every time it's showing up in AEW canon, it's showing up with the idea being, we know you don't know anything about this if you're just a pure AEW fan. So let's fill you in on it. So it's all been having to fill people in on something they didn't see happen in real time. And now here we are in 2025, and it's still happening. So they want this to be a big deal, that they unite. And that's a separate issue from them rushing it, which is valid, and that's been brought up by multiple people. But they haven't even really, in the canon of AEW proper, told the story of these two having an issue with each other. It's been so it doesn't mean that they shouldn't tell the story, but they just have to understand it's not going to have the resonance for I'd argue the majority of AEW fans that it does for people who have lived in real time this dynamic over the years outside of AEW. And I just don't think AEW comes for that often enough.
I just think that they could have gotten a lot more out of making this into a real. You could have built this in such a way where this could absolutely be the main event of the Australia show, and it very well could be. I still assume that there's probably going to be Moxley versus Cope. That's going to be a part of this show. But you could have built this in such a way that this is one of the biggest matches that AEW has put on with these two younger stars in Takeshita and Fletcher, who had breakout years in 2024. You have Omega, this legend of wrestling, who's come back this year, who took an entire year off. Will Ospreay, who's been fighting against these guys, and I just don't think that it totally stuck the landing of what they were trying to do. Yeah, they got to that point without just announcing the match, but you could have made this into one of the biggest announced matches in AEW had you done more of that storytelling. I truly believe that.
And David Bryant's author of Collision Hits and Misses says quick promo packages aren't enough either. They should need to really invest time. They need to really invest time into telling us this story if they want us to invest time into caring about it. And obviously they want us to care about it. My argument isn't they shouldn't do it. My argument is you're limiting your audience to whatever percent. It's 30 or 70%. You make your argument. Maybe but it's not 100%. It's not nearly 100%. It's not enough people are like, oh my God, Kenny and Ospreay have agreed to team. Yeah. And AEW's presenting it as if I can imagine a weekly Dynamite viewer the last 3 years going, why is this a big deal? What have I missed?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just
like it'll be a good match. It'll be a great match,
yep.
You know, but it should be a really big deal. It should be a seismic change in the company that now these guys are aligning with each other. And man, once they overcome the Don Callis family, you better watch out, Death Riders, because these two guys are coming for you. And there could have been a more effective way of telling that. And that may still be a version of the direction that they're going. But I just feel, we're familiar with New Japan. We're familiar with all this other story, and I'm just kind of feeling like, it was okay how they told it. It'll be a great match, but it could have been so much more effective within AEW in really establishing that. Look at these four guys that we have under contract here. Here are four major star, great wrestler guys that, one is right in his prime. Another guy is a legend, Hall of Famer. And then you got two younger guys who are up and coming and becoming these great wrestlers, and frame it in that type of way.
Imagine a friend of yours who is an NBA fan, Joel. Go back to this theme, subplot theme. But they were in a market where they lost interest in the NBA. But they know the NBA. They know its history. They're around your age, and they show up and they're like, I've got time now. Like, for whatever reason, I got time now. I want to follow the Wolves. Tell me about them. Imagine how excited you would be. To fill them in, to watch a game with them or watch multiple games, go to a game and go, let me tell you about Dillingham and why we drafted him and how that happened. And Terrence, like you'd be talking about the bench players excitedly. You'd be talking about the issues, the national perception of things and your knowledge from local podcasts about how they're all screwed. Am I right? The national media gets the Wolves wrong constantly.
They don't know it. They don't know anything about the Wolves.
Exactly. Every time
they don't know anything about them.
Exactly. People will throw things at me about the Wolves who aren't in this market, and it's like you just roll your eye because it's like it's as bad as people's interpretation of my Britt Baker story, which they don't care, and it's not because we have a complex about it. It's because we live it, we know it. So this new friend comes back and they're like, well, isn't Gobert hated on the team? And don't these people are dysfunctional and this and that? You're like, no, actually, none of that's true. Everybody who's here every week observing the team, they know they're people, brothers fight, as they say, but they're united. They have whatever, you would be excited to say that. And you would have all these layers and you'd love to tell them. There hasn't been a person on AEW television who has brought that level of excitement to bring new people into the fold. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with AEW is if you're not going to tell the story in canon, as Cody Rhodes said we ought to do, then you have to have somebody who's good and excited to talk new people into the world that AEW exists in. Because AEW doesn't exist in a vacuum, as Zach pointed out rightfully, but you need somebody who's better than Tony Schiavone, Excalibur, Nigel McGuinness, Taz, Matt Menard, Chris Jericho. Yeah. You need somebody who knows it and is excited and can weave that into the program. And it's one of the great tragedies of AEW is they want to be part of a larger universe, but they don't have anybody who's genuinely good, self-aware, and excited to hold your hand if you're an AEW viewer who likes what they watch on TV, but all this other stuff is happening and they don't get you excited about it. They just think, well, if you don't know the Secret Club handshake, you should have been watching New Japan World at 4 a.m. for a few years before AEW started. It's your fault.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's someone I know he's gotten a lot of heat lately for some of the stuff that happened, but like Chris Charlton in New Japan, yes, there are criticisms of stuff that happened on Wrestle Dynasty show, but he is very effective as a color commentator to getting people caught up on these stories and telling you why you should care about this, why they matter. Where as people are making their entrances, I mean, he's telling full stories, coming as they're coming out there, where it gets you caught up on all of that stuff. And I think AEW could do a much more effective job than a lot of the lightheartedness, the tropes and stuff that people do. Just kind of falling back on these same things. Like Nigel just kind of says a lot of the same stuff. Obviously, Tony Schiavone has been heavily criticized for this is the greatest moment, this type of stuff, and Taz is having a good time. There's been times where Taz has been really effective, and Excalibur is trying to hold the whole thing together and really try and drive it. But you don't have somebody who is able to kind of slow the game down and be able to tell those stories very effectively and see those nuances maybe better than Tony Khan is conveying to them, but can try and interpret that in a good way that can translate to the viewers as to why they should care. Be able to, in a very short, sweet way, not just a couple sentences, but be able to effectively tell these stories and not just always have just kind of the banter that goes back and forth that can seem kind of monotonous and at times make it feel like what we're seeing is frivolous.
Yep. Well put. JB says, I wish Kenny would have avoided the goofy line of now you can hit my music.
Yes, I hated that.
He was doing a great job of being serious, Kenny, since his return before that line. I didn't need him to do the New Japan closing line. I know it popped some people and they're happy about it. It's like Jericho didn't want people calling him a Y2J anymore. I'm here now. Let's start a new chapter. It felt like, well, we made progress and then suddenly we did.
Yeah, I really did not like the tone that he struck there. It just, I don't know, something felt wrong about the climbing up the truss and then having him do the line and talking through the music. Yeah. And then I need to get down now because I'm afraid of heights. It just kind of undermined the gravity of that moment.
Yep. And he can't help himself. It's like help yourself. Like, don't do it. Resist. Self-edit. Okay. And by the way, am I right? They missed Kenny's leap off the truss, the first truss.
They missed it. Yep. Yeah. They totally missed it. And also they went back to his battle cry music. I really liked, and I know it's a little bit quicker for the moment, but I really liked the new one that they did from the Final Fantasy creator. Yeah. I thought that made him I thought that was really main event feeling music.
Yeah. What are the prospects of King, Matthews, and Hart as a unit without Malachi Black? It felt weird. Things felt out of order. We got a vignette of saying we're a new faction, but earlier in the show, it was like, oh, Julia, you're alone now. You don't have I felt like they were writing off earlier in the show that Julia, like Jamie Hayter's like, you have no one beside you, but you're still a tough bitch. Let's have a rematch. It was almost like the story was Julia was not part of a group anymore, and then like a half hour later, oh, we're in a new group. We don't have a name yet. We just don't have a leader. We're like, that felt disconnected. There was also they were talking about sorry to add to it, but they were talking about a match as if we all knew it, and I don't think we knew it yet. I think it was Ricochet. And so there was a segment where a match was talked about as if it was common knowledge, and then later they broke the news that the match was going to happen. And
yes, Ricochet versus Swerve in Atlanta, and I had not seen any graphics or anything for that.
Yep. And so they mix that, and I know I talked to people in AEW about this semi-regularly, and they're just sort of shrug their shoulder. Yeah, we don't have good quality control when it comes to this stuff in our scripts. I mean, it's I'm not saying they don't want to fix it. They just sort of, unfortunately, it's a pattern. So anyway, but to the question is, how will they do without Malachi? So let's focus on that question. Hold on. Zach Barber says they announced that match last week, fellas.
Okay.
All right. Won't stand corrected on that, but fair enough.
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as the I'm not sure if they agreed on what their new name was, but the former House of Black members, yeah, it's been weird how they've really just been hitting it over the head of like, you don't need to follow somebody more. They did this either last week or the week before with Will Ospreay and Brody King, and then you had a similar thing this week between Jamie Hayter and Julia Hart, and then later in the show you have the promo of now they're all together as their own group. They're just not following Malachi Black. It's just, I mean, I think that there's talent in all of them. I'd like to see them being pushed more as a tag team, be contenders to go against the Hurt Syndicate. I think that they'd be great contenders to be built up for that. But certainly there is a weird thing there of where they're really putting it, like hitting you over the head with that Malachi, without saying it, but Malachi is no longer here. We don't need him as a leader. Is there anything to like read into that of Tony Khan's just kind of like, good riddance, Malachi, get out of here?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I was going to say another report that I got right as far as the direction of that thing. It was some inside information on my VIP Keller hotline that got picked up by aggregators. And I don't know. I didn't read the report, so I'm not going to cast dispersions. But if patterns anything, they probably got things wrong and connected dots that I explicitly didn't connect. But nevertheless, was Christopher Daniels' emotional plea to Hangman the beginning of a Hangman tough face with an edge arc? The subtle shift in Hangman's eyes to end the segment was masterfully done. People have been talking about how great Hangman is when he's like frothing and yelling and wide-eyed, and I pushed back on that. I like Kevin Owens when he yells. I don't like when MJF yells. I never liked when Dolph Ziggler yelled. I usually don't like when Samoa Joe like got all bug-eyed and frothing and yelled. I think I appreciate more subtlety. The Jake Roberts, school of wrestling promos where you listen more carefully when they talk quietly. Sid tried to do that. Like he'd yell, but then he'd talk quietly. Oh, what's he saying now? I'm going to listen because he's talking quietly. I like Hangman when he's more subtle, when it's more Batista esque rather than stereotypical yelling promo. I like Karrion Kross now better because he seems like a real person with thoughts that you can see in his subtle facial expressions. I didn't like him when he was growling like he's trying to scare little girls in a haunted house. So this is a better version of Hangman, and I think he has the chops for this. And I want that more than the For Your Consideration Academy Award clip that Adam Copeland goes to every third promo. Where it's like, oh, I'm going to really get an award for my emotional, over-the-top ranting. I don't like that Hangman as much. People say, oh, it's great. I don't. I think anybody can yell and act intense. What I like is what gets pointed out by JB here, which is you get rewarded for paying attention. There's that little shift. And human beings, dogs can read your face. Humans can. There's a little subtle shift in your facial expression says a ton more that resonates emotionally with people. And that's what good acting is versus just yelling and being over the top. And I thought Hangman hit that note tonight. And that's why it was one of the better segments coming out of a feud that people were kind of ripping on. Because it's like, why are we doing a Texas death match with Christopher Daniels when AEW has an age problem with what they're featuring? But this felt like a good payoff, and Hangman did it well. I want to see more of this Hangman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he's showing a lot of his talents of how he can evolve this character and using those facial expressions where I've been on the same page of I don't like when he's doing the yelling, where they're doing these extreme angles with him, that I think that he is so much more talented to get to be more effective by doing things that are a lot more subtle.
Yep. Why did the trios titles even exist? I had completely forgotten that Claudio Pac and Yuta had them and that they were still
They shouldn't
around.
exist.
No, they should not have existed to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Is the Death Rider storyline being dragged out until Darby gets back from Mount Everest? If he does. If so, sorry for being dark, but it's statistically possible he won't.
Sure.
If so, that's a terrible idea. The story is completely run out of any direction in steam. I'm not sure that Tony Khan will ever learn to make an adequate pivot or put his foot down if someone wants to take time off and it interferes with such a critical storyline. I'm fine with him saying okay to Darby. I think people have their terms of employment, and if you agree to them, you abide by them. Darby's worth it. Don't book a storyline that has to go into a treading water mode if you know this is likely to happen or is about to happen. And if it wasn't agreed to and you book the storyline, tell Darby, let's wait a year. I don't know the details on it, but I get the frustration. But I don't think they think they're in a holding pattern. I think they think they're working their way to Darby, and when the time is right, he'll be back.
Yeah, it's strange here with not, they wrote him off of television, and now people who know these other things and they've alluded to some of that on television is that he's going to go on his venture to climbing Mount Everest, and so you're going to be holding off doing that, and it just kind of is like, all right, then we'll just kind of keep going through these contenders going up against Moxley, and you feel like you're just waiting for him to come back, waiting for that next thing.
All right. One positive. Oh, actually, on Hangman, Zach commented on it. Let me see here. I think the subtle shift with Hangman has more impact when he's been so out of his mind and yelling. That's true, Zach. I just would argue that being out of his mind and yelling is not something that I felt was worthy of some of the praise it was getting, as no one's cutting better promos than him. It's fine. It served a purpose. I acknowledge it. I'm not even saying don't do it. I'm just not praising it as like next level promos. I just think being bug-eyed and frothing and yelling, anybody can do. What I appreciate and heap praise on more is more subtlety. That's where MJF will get back to being universally praised if he stops over-modulating and yelling on the microphone and going for meta comments that he's going to get social media ephemeral sugar rushes from, and thinking of every crass Don Rickles-like insult that he can come up with, and instead stay focused, curate, and have a message as a heel to get heat and put your babyface over. And he did that tonight, as opposed to last week, where there was some good, but there was excess that needed to be trimmed. And that's so. With Hangman, I thought sometimes it was over the top, and people just were like, "This is great." I'm like, no, it just feels like over the top bad acting to me. But he's capable of more, and I think we'll see that. So, but Zach's not wrong. You want to have if you're going to go to a different place, you have to be in another place to get to a new place. I just wouldn't praise it in the way that some people did, as like, this is the holy grail of promos, is yelling and frothing and being bug-eyed. I just think any hack can do that. Some better than others, but that's not the highest form of wrestling promo art for me. The art of the wrestling promo. One positive development, JB's email. I think Jay White might be getting his title shot in Brisbane, which is much better than Copeland at this point. True. Somebody compared in the chat. Who is it? Sadler version 3. Copeland's like a male Charlotte Flair, oft injured, so some people miss him while he's gone. Returns to some excitement, then people are bored to death with them a week or two later. Quick comment on that, Joel. Jay White.
I think that Jay White, it does because of where he's from. He's from New Zealand. Being part of that being from that area of the world makes a lot of sense for him to be in a title match against Jon Moxley there versus Cope, who I just think has been kind of treading water since he's come back. Like I wouldn't say agree with every bit of that of what Sadler said, but yeah, there definitely is kind of the excitement of when he comes back. But I mean, he's still, he's one of those veteran wrestlers where there's only so much he can do. He has a certain style that he has, and I think he can be effective in certain ways. But putting him in the main event scene, I'm not sure that that's the right place for him.
Finally, I think Claudio has to lose to Jarrett in a fluky way next week. I don't think Jarrett crushing Claudio in 2025 is the best look for whatever is left of the Death Rider reputation. Speaking of which, the sentiment I got from social media, for whatever that's worth, it's worth something, but it, in proper context, grouped with a lot of other things. Yeah. As most people really liked most of the content of the show, aside from the Death Riders Copeland stuff. It's critical for AEW to recognize this and sensibly pivot sooner rather than later. The bones of the show are strong, but the negative shadow that the Death Rider storyline casts drags things down for people. As always, love the show, and go VIP, everyone. Yeah, I'm not as down on it. But I think that the initial premise of it just was awful, and plastic bags and the jumbled messages from Moxley that I don't think is connecting with people in a way that fits the canon of the AEW universe is an ongoing problem. But the idea that they're a heel faction that's, ganging up on people, and they're badasses, but I don't know. I mean, I think there's still enough there where it's fine. I don't love it, but I'm not as down on it, Joel, as it seems other people are.
It just seems very repetitive, and just having the huge heel faction come. I mean, during the main event, I was expecting the rest of the Death Riders to come out at some point and interfere, and I was really surprised actually when that didn't happen. And Cope actually won with, he was kind of doing like a swinging neck breaker type move, where it was just kind of a surprising pinfall when he won there, because I just thought we were going to get Claudio and Yuta coming out there at some point. Then they came out after the match, where that stuff is just really played out, and you've seen that especially in New Japan, where this gets compared to the House of Torture stuff that they're doing there, of just a lot of shenanigans, outside interference, beating people down, where people get bored of that stuff because it gets really repetitive over and over again. And Death Riders have felt very repetitive.
Yeah. And I think people just want fresh opponents and some payoffs, and we might get that. It might, this could be a lull until we get into some of the bigger events that'll add some juice. But there's some course correcting that needs to be done. Wheeler Yuta, by the way, his hair is like, his bangs are covering his eyes. He's like that poor poodle that you see going for a walk, and you're like, how do they even see? Get him a haircut. His hair is just overtaking. David Bryant had a comment, I don't know where it went, earlier about it too, but anyway, I'm not even ripping it. It's distinct. His hair just is growing, and he's not trimming it, and now he can't see. No. Joel, anything else you want to add before we sign off?
I don't have anything else more to add.
That's a good call. Thanks, Joel. Appreciate it. Search PWTorch. You'll have the All Elite Conversation Club later this week, and it won't be as long as this show, but you'll talk about different things with Greg.
That's true. Greg and I will be Greg and I will be recording tomorrow night. We typically record that on Friday mornings, but due to his schedule, we're going to be doing tomorrow night. I want to get Greg's thoughts on a lot of the stuff going on. I want to talk about, some of the stuff that you reported on Britt Baker, even though we brought it up here. It's still a news piece that's going on, and get Greg's thoughts on those things, and as well as some of the other ongoing stuff that's happening with Dynamite. We got some more matches announced for Australia. So I'm really excited to see what he's thinking of the Death Riders, the Jeff Jarrett stuff, and I think that's going to lead to a lot of really good conversation, and see if he has a different perspective on a lot of these things that we talked about today.
Joel, what do you think is the most newsworthy part of what I actually reported on Britt Baker?
I don't really think that there's anything big about, because I think it's pretty consistent, as you mentioned before, with what has been known about Britt at this point, that we've known about this MJF storyline. It has been mysterious when she has been off of TV for long periods of time. Yep. She's been known to have an attitude. You can see that on TV. To just say, like, if she's in the same category as like Ricky Starks, Miro, where they've just kind of fallen out of favor and they're not going to be released anytime soon because Tony Khan's not just going to give somebody to WWE. I think that is what it is, but I think it's more just kind of for people to hear that especially for Miro less so. I think there's less people advocating to see more Miro and bring him back on TV, but certainly for Ricky Starks, there's people who are very upset that he's not being featured when he's healthy. And I think that Britt still has a lot of fans. And I think the news is just kind of more upsetting that I think a lot of people are thinking they're probably not going to get much more Britt Baker at this point. And so I think it's big in that way.
I think the 6 words that is the news with Britt is, why has she not been on TV? Is it because she's injured? She asked for time off? No. The news is AEW management is fed up with her. We don't know what the result is going to be, but that's what my report boiled down to. They're fed up with her. I didn't use the word fed up, but like I was thinking, like, how do we summarize in one line what the actual news was? And it's in a way, I reported it as a way to say, it's not because of Adam Cole. It's not like now that Adam Cole's back, she's not allowed on Dynamite. I wanted to dispel that. And people have said, they get along. But it was in part because of the MJF thing. I mean, MJF's influential, and that blow up with him and Brett did not help Brett's reputation. And if Tony, I'm not saying there was an ultimatum, you choose me or her, or she said you choose him or me, but that is a factor. But the news was there's some other things too. But the 6 words are AEW management is fed up. Well, it's 6 words. Is fed up with Britt. We don't know what, but my reporting did not say we don't know what's going to happen. I did report, someone told me that no one in the women's locker room would be sad if she doesn't come back. There's no guarantee she'll be back, but I didn't report she won't be. And I was explicitly clear on that in my opening sentence and my closing 2 sentences in the 2 minutes that I talked about this. So, So to answer my own question, the news coming out of my report on the Wade Keller hotline for VIP members, sign up, listen, is AEW management currently is fed up with her. That's why she's not on TV. That's it. Right.
And they probably were hoping that at this point she's been with the company since the beginning, and it feels like she's regressed in a lot of ways, that the promos have not been there. The performances, she was given a really big spot on their biggest show of the year last year. And, I didn't think that delivered. And we've seen since then that Mercedes has had some really stellar matches with some other opponents. And the thing with Britt Baker, it was a big deal when she first returned, but I think the results of that, I mean, as AEW management, you have to be disappointed with it. And you just have to say, okay, well, we have plenty of other women that we could be giving this time to. Why don't we start investing with those people if she has, a quote unquote, an attitude problem, or just, if you want to say fed up with her, for a multitude of reasons that have all been openly reported and are
that's the thing. There's nothing, there was no like shocking revelation. I would have headlined with it. I didn't even run a story on the website. I didn't think it was like I didn't think what I reported was even like, I don't know what the headline would be. I guess it would be AEW management fed up with Britt Baker. I mean, I guess I could have, but right. I didn't even write a story on the website. It was just an update on a hotline. And then it's crazy in this area. I'm still not fully used to, how that stuff gets a life of its own and then gets distorted.
Yeah, it just gets distorted, and people just create these bigger headlines, obviously, for the clicks of that.
Exactly.
Because it's Britt Baker, and she has been a controversial person within the locker room. And whenever there's some sort of controversy with somebody in the AEW locker room, it picks up a lot of traction. And you're a very credible source on that stuff. And so people are going to really glom onto that and try and extract some other meaning with that type of thing.
Yeah. All right, cool. PWTorch.com/GoVIP if you're wondering what this Wade Keller hotline's all about when I break news or say something that turns into the conversation on wrestling social media all weekend. GoVIP, PWTorch.com/GoVIP. I had the graphic up on the screen for our YouTube viewers. 35 years of podcasts and archives, nearly 2,000 back issues dating back to the late 1980s, ad-free version of our website, weekly PDF newsletter. Ad-free versions of these shows. You can get a free 7-day trial by searching PWTorch VIP on Patreon or Spotify, and check out what the VIP shows are all about. It's a great lineup, talented people. We'd love to have your support. If you like our tone and our approach to covering wrestling, I think it is different than a lot of bombast and rah home team fanboy fangirl type stuff. I mean, we're just bring a journalistic approach, try to be fair to everybody, but we don't hold back. If we have an opinion, everybody here knows if you're on the show, you get to express it. I express it, and our co-hosts and our chat room and our callers do too. But we try to bring, a product we can be proud of in terms of how we cover things. So check it out. Support us if you like what we do. We rely on our VIP members to do what we do. And that is it. Joel, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Wade. We'll talk to you next time.
Yep. Thanks everybody for listening. If you made it this far, thank you. This was a long show. This is fun. Joel, sorry if you don't get sleep. My fault. But hopefully it was fun anyway. Thanks, everybody.
I'm surprised I'm still awake.
Yes. You almost look like you're not now that I'm really paying attention to you.
Yeah.
No one's fallen asleep on the show before. Callers have, but not a co-host. Thanks, Joel.
Bye.